Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I found Bunker 999. I, 20M, started working at my hometown's local grocery store in late July of this year. Compared to my last two jobs as a student worker at my college's dining facility and as a table busser / food server for a steakhouse, it's a lot better than both of them. And it even improves on the issues I had with those old jobs. At my first job, I got paid way too infrequently and never enough. I use a joke that I got paid the bare minimum wage because I was only paid $9.50 an hour, and I could only work 10 hours a week due to my class schedule and tolerance for stress. The other issue is that there were hardly enough workers. This was an exact issue at my second job at the steakhouse. It was a small place that was only open past 5 until around 9. So the amount of customers there wouldn't be too overwhelming as long as there wasn't some big party going on. I get paid by the hour and by tips, and every Thursday I'd be paid between $90 to over $200, but that was usually due to how many shifts that I was given that week. Some weeks I was given no shifts, but at the grocery store I'd be paid $15 an hour, have multiple shifts that were at least 4 hours, and rarely are there too little amount of workers for closing. And you know, I really liked working at the grocery store compared to my last two jobs. It's a 20 to 25 minute walk from and to my ma's place where I live, so I'm getting exercise. I feel like I'm being really helpful when customers ask me for where certain things are, like where the eggs are, and some tasks take up almost the entire shift, so I'm not feeling too overwhelmed by the chores I need to accomplish until we're closing. And this week, it was more of the same. I work at the meat department of the store, and yesterday, or Thursday the 28th as I'm writing this while processing it, was restocking packaged products in the packaged meat section. This section is where we keep our hot dogs, breakfast meat, lunch meat, other meats, and a few other types of products like mac and cheese or mashed potatoes. From a wall of cardboard boxes, all placed on a green U-boat that I pulled from the cooler, I would open a box's plastic seal with my box cutter and then find the place where the product needed to go. Occasionally, the incorrect products are placed on the U-boat, and on Thursday, it was a package of pepperoni that I had never seen sold before that looked out of place. The meat was in a thin black package with a plastic shine to it. The thick circle slices of the pink pepperoni had these tiny red and green specks inside, which I assumed was similar to what the olive leaf bologna that we sell. In fact, I think it was the same company that made this type of pepperoni. Not sure. My memory gets hazy with those types of details. I took out my Zebra device from my back pocket. A Zebra, by the way, is a brand of handheld computer device that we use to keep track of products and complete other tasks. It's really useful to have around. I scan its barcode so that I can see if this product even belonged to the section. We do store pepperoni, but usually not in the glass door refrigerators. Yeah, I'm just as confused as to why pepperoni doesn't need refrigeration, and this product looked like it required refrigeration. And when the screen for the product appeared, it said it belonged to Bunker 999. Now, the meat department only has 4 bunkers, which we use to store extra products that we didn't have space for on the walls or items that are on sale. Seeing that number was both confusing and funny. I showed it to my co-worker, Steven, who then smiled and said, "Bunker 999? There's no such thing." I later found one of my department managers, Joss, and asked him about it. He frowned seeing the bunker number. Likely just means that we can put the item in any space we can find space for it. So it's not a case of us receiving a product meant for a different store. I was only asking because last month, my older coworker George discovered a package of Myers sausage rolls. It was a funny situation, as I didn't think that the truck company that gave us our food would send us products from a totally different store. Even funnier that George happily took 2 of them home. Josh raised his shoulders and shrugged. Could be. I've never seen a zebra mention Bunker 999 before. Josh let me be, and I did as I was asked to do. When I got back to my main task of unloading the U-boat, I eventually discovered yet another product for Bunker 999. This time it was a box full of bratwurst. Smoked cheddar bratwurst by Fredericks. For some reason, I recalled how if you tap a bunker's number, it would give you a map of directions on where you could find that bunker. I didn't use it very often as there was enough labels inside the store to help me find products for customers. I know my memory isn't perfect, but it is still great at remembering that kind of detail. I wish my memory failed me because of what happened after I tapped on the bunker's number. The map directed me into the back area of the store where only employees could go. Product stuffed almost everywhere except a path set between 2 yellow lines. This was meant for the fire exit, which I followed for as long as the zebra's route allowed me to. And the zebra had led me to a fire exit, the first one that had caught my eye when I started working here. What had caught my eye in particular was the pale yellow masking tape that spelt "Do Not Open." One of the department managers had explained to me that the dramatic sign was there because if that door opened, the alarm would go off. My curiosity should have ended there if the zebra hadn't been leading to this door, and one other thing, I knew what should be behind this door. This fire exit was inside where we receive our product shipments from the trucks. It's also where we throw bags of garbage in the trash chute, which was only a couple of feet right of the exit door. But to the exit door's left was one of those metal doors that pull up, and I've seen what's on the other side of that door. It's a concrete walkway with a metal fence, preventing someone from falling into the small pond that's just behind the store. So the zebra pointed me to the fire exit was even more bizarre, as why would the door just point me to the outside? I don't blame myself for impulsively entering, I just wish I hadn't. Behind that fire exit door, which I immediately shut behind me, was a long concrete hallway into shadows. I didn't hear any noise ahead of me or behind me, just to be sure my ears weren't tricking me. I pulled open the door again to see if the fire alarm hadn't rang. It was quiet aside from the loud hum of some machine in the background. I closed the door and looked at the zebra for both the time and what direction I needed to go. It was only 5:01 p.m., just a minute over an hour I had begun working, and the direction the zebra was pointing me in was forward. I really should have thought to go to my department manager and show him this. I don't know why I didn't. I just felt compelled to go down there. I'm blaming it on my fascination with adventure. It got me lost in a forest while hiking in the wilderness once, and it was going to drag me through what I can only describe as bizarre. Once everything became pitch black in my vision, and the difference between having my eyes open and closed was minimal, a pair of glass doors slid open. I was at the store's entrance. I took a few steps forward, hearing the doors close behind me as I took in what the many glass panes showed me. Outside, there was nothing. Absolute nothing. No cars, no parking lot, no street lamps, no trees, grass, or other stores that should neighbor my workplace. I should have been hit with some sense of horror, but I was rather awestruck by this bizarreness. Then a familiar happy tune song began to play, and my amazed look turned into one of disgust. It was that stupid earworm song that I hated to hear the most whenever I was working. I Want Candy, not the original version of the song. It was that cover that played in the teaser trailer for Illumination's Hot movie. I cringe every time I think of that movie, especially the scene where E.B. and Cyclops' actor, whose name escapes me at the moment, were put into the awkward situation of having to sing that song. I hate it, and that should have been the key indicator that I needed to leave. And I could have. I would later figure out the doors can open and close regardless if you're entering or exiting, but we'll get to that part later. Right now, I had entered the lifeless store. No one was there. It was dead, quiet aside from the song playing. It was weird not hearing the subtle buzz of cart wheels moving over the smooth floor of the grocery store, or someone's kid blabbering loudly some distance away. Even weirder to hardly see anyone. All the self-checkout computers were still on, even the computers in the regular checkout aisles occasionally. I'd spot a random cart full of an assortment of items. First one I found was near the bakery, which was between the meat department at the back of the store and the deli, which was closer to the front. The cart had a variety of items, but mostly toys, bags of candy, and decorative materials. If a person were still driving this cart, I'd make the assumption that they were preparing for a birthday party. The next cart I saw, I didn't get a good look at. It was in the alcohol section, and I think I saw a 6-pack of beer in the otherwise empty cart. There was a few more carts as I wanted to place, but one that stuck out to me was one cart that had fallen over. Its contents were basic groceries like bread, yogurt, orange juice, and other things, but they were all on the floor. But nobody was there. So who knocked all this cart down? My zebra let out a notification whistle, and when I pulled it from my back pocket to examine the device, I tapped the bell symbol to look for the notification, except nothing was there. I frowned at the oddity and closed out of notifications, returning to the map. I was being led into the same direction I had followed just before coming to this version of the grocery store. And I followed that path again, found myself in that dark hallway again, and found myself in the store's entrance again. Except this time, a different song was playing. This song wasn't quite as annoying as the first one. Issue was I didn't know the name of it. I mainly listened to movie soundtracks. Think Oppenheimer or Godzilla -1. All I could tell was that it was some sort of upbeat punk rock music. But I recognized it. It played during store hours. When I walked into the store itself, things were slightly different. I think the color of everything was just slightly more saturated. Like there was this orange that I saw. Rather than it being the exact color of orange that oranges are, it was a little more red than what you would expect. Even my pale skin tone seemed a little more saturated, like I had gotten a mix of a sunburn and a tan. Everything under the light seemed a little more saturated. Other than that, not much else had changed except for the carts. There were more of them, and 2 more of them were pushed over. Some of the grocery items were torn open in strange ways. A red and white can of whipped cream had a chunk of its side ripped off. All the cream had been drained from it, but the substance was nowhere near the scene. Something had likely drank it from the torn can. A jug of chocolate milk was torn up the same way with another similar-sized chunk of its side torn open, except droplets of chocolate milk were found near the scene. All of that was near the dairy aisle. And the next item I found was a torn case of skin-on bone-in chicken legs, except, funnily, the chicken meat had no skin or bones, just torn up meat. I nervously laughed at myself before moving on to where the zebra wanted me to go. God, I should have left by that point. For the next hour and a half, I kept wandering through the same simple maze that was slowly changing. If it took me 5 minutes to get from front of the store to back without wandering, maybe 10 if I had wandered, then I must have gone to the store at most a dozen times. The only consistent variables of each version of the store was that a new song would be playing on a loop. Carts would be randomly set about, some of which were disturbed by something. The lighting would be slightly changed, and the one variable that I hadn't noticed until now was that the days had reversed. I only noticed in the now pink light of the 12th or 13th store when I looked at the screen display in the service area of my department. This was where we sold fish, chicken, cow, and pig meat to customers. And the screen display would show the weight and price of whatever they were asking for. It could also tell the date and time. And while the time was 1.5 hours past when I started looking for Bunker 999, the date wasn't correct. It was August the 16th, 2025, 12 days before what should be August the 28th. It seems that for every time I pass through a fire exit door, cross the hallway, and enter a new grocery store, time would have reverted past 1 day. I don't know why I kept going forward. The intrigue, I guess. The mystery I was digging into was fascinating. A fire exit door that has a hallway with no light, which then leads to a lifeless grocery store that has another fire exit door that leads to a similar place, and I'm being guided by a zebra device. It made me wonder what would it be like if there was a fire and everyone passed through that door. I giggled a little at the idea as it kept returning to my mind. The pure panic of a co-worker escaping their blaze and demise, only to enter both pure confusion and awe at entering a grocery store very akin to their old workplace, yet very different at the same time. 2 more hours would pass with little change. I didn't take as much time to explore this time, so I think I entered my 36th store when something new happened. The differences were less subtle this time around. Shopping carts were everywhere, and they were all tipped over with their contents on the ground. A sweetly foul smell sucker punched my nostrils and immediately made me gag. I have a particularly sensitive sense of smell, so this was a new kind of hell for me. And looking back, I'm surprised that I didn't gag at the smell of the chicken meat robbed of its bones and skin, as it seemed to have been out for some time. I should have turned back, but when I looked at the exit, I saw someone who was also wearing the same blue grocery store apron I had on run to the door I entered through just prior. I didn't even hear him walk past me, and I was confused as to why he was running in the first place. Was he scared from seeing me, or because of something else chasing him? Well, I would learn the reason, but only because fear saved my ass. Somehow, I continued forward. I'm wondering if I just felt compelled to do so, because of what I find was luring me with the zebra. The music eventually changed from something you'd listen to on the radio to classical music. I heard Ave Maria playing through the speakers as I walked into the 60th store. The audio's quality was in poor shape, as it sounded so grainy. The static warped the songs, continuing just as the smell got worse. I don't know why I kept going on. Things seemed to get worse with each store I walked into. And God, I should have left by the 99 store. There were these flies, these giant black flies. They were so fat and slow moving, yet somehow fast enough to avoid my hands swatting at them. They appeared as black dots in the super bright light of this store. They were feeding on the sickeningly sweat-smelling meat and fruit that had fully decayed in this store. They even took small bites out of me, and their quick nibbles surprisingly stung. But they mostly avoided me. I wasn't dead to them yet. I hate bugs and all those creepy crawly things. I can tolerate spiders though, and God, this place needs spiders. A whole army of them. Big ones. Big spiders to eat the big flies. It would be good to have some big spiders, or maybe some hungry frogs. Frogs would have been good too. They love eating bugs, especially the big ones. Any insectivore that liked flies would have been great. Their thick buzzing clouded the already shitty quality of the classical song that was playing, and nothing but buzzing could be heard in the back area near the fire exit. This was because in the back area near that exit is where we also stored extra products, ones that didn't need to be in a fridge, and they had all rotten and the flies craved their rot. I didn't like how their tiny dirty bodies flicked against my skin, occasionally taking small painful nibbles from there that itched like hell. I finally found safety behind the fire exit hallway. I took a moment to just lean against the door and take a breather. You should listen to your conscience and go back, someone had said to me. Just ahead of me, mostly cast in shadows, was a man about a few inches taller than me. Mind you, I'm 6 feet tall, so he was about 6'3" maybe? I couldn't see his face, but I could tell he was older based on the weight of his voice. There is nothing down there worth finding, he said to me. You know you want to go back. You don't know that. I lied. I was too unnerved by what he said to admit he's right. The stranger said nothing more and took one step forward. I could see him more clearly with the help of the light that shined through the door cracks. He was covered head to toe in bruises and markings. His blue eyes shimmered in the light, not like pools of water, but like cobalt dust sprinkled on a steel sheet. It was strange to look at as he passed by me and walked into the 99 store. I wonder if he was even human to begin with. I mean, he did look human physically. Sounded like one too, but was he human? I entered the 100 store, and it was like I had entered the very first grocery store. Not the one I used the fire exit door to get to, but the one I walked to every day. The only difference is that the classical music was still playing. There were abandoned carts at random places, and there were no people. Other than that, everything was fine. And when I entered the 101st store, everything looked a little more saturated, but a bit darker too, like the lights had been dimmed slightly. And I got this feeling that from the shadows, the eyes of something were attached to me. There was a familiar pattern with these stores. With every new store I entered, a new song would play. The lighting and colors would be adjusted. Abandoned carts would decorate the place with some tipped over and eaten from. A day would go back. At the near end, a population of mutant flies would grow. And by the 100th store, everything would reset to relative normalness, minus the day going backwards thing, until I enter the next door where the pattern repeats itself. But now there was 3 new variables that I was noticing. With every new 100 stores, it would be just a little darker than before. And with every next 100 stores, I'd see more people running for the exit out of here, some encouraging me to escape. And of course, there was a third variable. As with the next 100 stores, the feeling of being watched would become much more apparent. I should have listened to those workers. I closed the door to the 899 store and walked down the black hallway. Entering the 900 store, it was almost pitch black, but someone blinded me with their flashlight. Go back home, Henry, someone told me, while everyone is still there. I almost asked how she knew my name, but then I remembered that I was still wearing my work apron, which had my name tag pinned on it. My eyes adjusted to light, and I saw a woman past her 50s, sitting in one of those rolling chairs we have at the main office. She looked tired, really tired, and she had the same look in her eyes as that one man from the 100 store's hallway did. The iris of her eyes looked like cobalt dust sprinkled over a steel sheet. I looked at her apron, and her name tag read the name Gabriella. Look, Gabriella, I come all this way. I'm not going back. I said to her, look at your device, what's today's date is it? I pulled out my phone, but she shook her head no. Your zebra, take out the zebra. I pulled my zebra from my back pocket and looked at it. It was 2026. The rules of time have changed again from this point on. Rather than 1 day backward, it's 365 days forward. And that change is permanent until you leave here. What do you mean? I could take a guess at what she meant. I just didn't want to believe the implication. Check your phone. I pulled it from my front pocket and pressed its on button. I read the date on my screen. It matched the one on my zebra. 1 year pushed forward by the store was 1 year pushed forward outside the store. I really should have left the store at that point. I don't know why I didn't run out the door. Every part of me was screaming that I had to go back. Everyone I cared about would be missing me. Not only that, but I would have missed out on so much. I was planning to see a friend that I hadn't talked to in a while. Another friend and I were going to watch the new Five Nights at Freddy's movie coming out this year. My stepdad and I were going to practice driving so that I can finally get my driver's license. And yet, for some reason, I said, what if I continued forward and find bunker 999? You don't want to do that, and you know that you don't. What will I find? Nothing of value. But nothing. Go back, young man. Live a life to be lived well. Don't waste time here. There is no secret to be found, only guilt to be given to you. I had somehow convinced myself that was a lie. Against Gabriella's warnings, I marched off into my own hell. When I entered the 901st store, something was different. I knew it was dead quiet. There were no carts with groceries abandoned on the sale floor, and I knew something was wrong with the lights. All the bulbs were pitch black, and yet the place was fully lit. It was like the light was coming from the wrong places. What should be the darkest area of a shelf was instead the brightest part. Outside, instead of a black abyss, it was white, pure white, like snow reflecting sunlight. It almost hurt to stare at for too long. I could feel my mind breaking down as I passed through the next 99 exit doors. I felt compelled to go forward, but the knowledge that years were going to pass outside the store was tearing me up. I wanted to go back. No, I wanted to run back. Run back and never look back. Maybe run just fast enough to spend time with the people I care about and have fun with them. I want to go home and play video game, eat junk food, right? Watch films and not be stuck here wasting my time with walking to the next exit. Yet I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop walking down the hallways, through store, through the exit door, and into the hallway again. I think at some point I had started crying. With each new store, things grew more bizarre. I could hear the slightest of movements in the strange shadows that were projected from the light bulbs. Oh, yeah, the light bulbs create shadows now. It was like the rule of in the absence of light. There is only darkness was switched, and the darkness was slowly prevailing over the stores. It was impossible. All of this was impossible, and that fascination had me by the throat. Maybe that's just what I want to believe, because I wasn't alone in my travels. The feeling that I was being watched by someone was true. It only revealed itself after I opened the door to the 999th store. The place was totally different. There was no entrance with glass walls that were meant to show the exterior. There were no carts, no lights emitting shadow, and no products in the dozens upon dozens of bunkers that were now in front of me. Spread 6 feet apart were these massive empty rectangular black metal and plastic bunkers with shadow light bulbs casting darkness over them. The first row had 9 bunkers, as did the second, the third, the fourth, and so on until the 111th row. All of them were illuminated by the inverted glow of the glossy floor. I looked at my Zebra, and it pointed forward before finally losing all of its battery. The walk was long. My eyes played tricks on me as I stared at the many abysses that surrounded me. I could swear that I saw woeful faces, desperate ones. I was screaming in my head to turn back now before something happens. Looking back, I don't know why I was really panicking. It should have occurred to me that it was too late. After another set of hours walking to the 111th set of 9 bunkers, I stared at the bunker on the left. Each of them had been labeled with a number, and 999 was the 999th bunker from the abyss of the darkness projected over it. Something long emerged. It was like my hand, only thinner, paler, and with long, strange fingers. As those fingers tried to wrap themselves around me, I finally did what I should have done at the first bunker run. I ran away as fast as I could, faster than I had ever ran before. I did not care if my Zebra fell out of my pocket. I did not care if I escaped and died from the beast that tried to capture me. I did not care if I had lost time with my friends and family. I burst out of the door and crashed into someone entering. I hit the ground hard, feeling the friction of concrete scrape off skin. I was surprised at the sensation, and as I regathered my senses, I realized that I was outside the store. But it wasn't the grocery store I remembered. The logo was green rather than blue, and the clothes of the person I had bumped into were totally different. After I apologized, I asked him the oddest question he must have heard that day. "Can you tell me what's today's date? Are you all right?" His accent sounded almost like a regular American one, but something was off about it. "Yeah, can you just tell me the date?" "August 30th. "What year?" 3024, 999 years after 2025. I had traveled 999 years after 2025, and I lost all time with my friends, family, and any future that I would want with them. I was in an alien future now, which makes you wonder how you're reading this, right? Well, time fluctuates in what Gabriella calls the 999 stores, and because we got Wi-Fi at the real store, we got it here too. Cosmic Wi-Fi, as I like to joke. So as I'm uploading this post here, I hope that it at least reaches my friends and family. I just want to say to them that I am so sorry. I wish we got to spend more time together. That's all I've ever wanted with any of you. Time that we have now and forever lost with each other. I know you guys will be able to move on without me. So please don't come looking for me. I've got food and shelter in the 999 stores. Entertainment too. It won't be as fun without any of you here. Just please, don't come looking for me. Please don't find me. Don't make my mistake of coming here. There is nothing to find here except lost time. And the same goes for any future worker at a grocery store, because it doesn't just apply to the one that I work at. Every store has a 999th bunker, and it's the same one. So, listen to me when I say, don't fucking go and find a 999th bunker. And if you do and meet me, I will drag you out myself. Story 2. Remember those creepy chain emails from the early mid-2000s? I got one this morning. Maybe you're too young or too old to know what I'm talking about, so I'll explain first. Basically, somebody sent out an email with a subject line like, "Keep reading, do not ignore," and then the message itself will contain some kind of short horror story. Something about how a schoolgirl was pushed down a well, and if you didn't repost it or forward it to X amount of people, she'd come crawling out of your toilet and drag you down into the pipes. Something like that. They all typically follow a similar formula. The first time I got one of them was back in middle school. Not an email, but a Facebook post that popped up on my feed. I don't exactly remember what the story was, just that it terrified me enough at the time that I actually did repost it. Something my friends completely roasted me for after the fact. But hey, no demon girl ever came crawling out of my toilet. So who's to say I didn't make the right call? Obviously, the entire concept of these chain mails, or scare mails, was pretty dumb and juvenile. And most of the stories were so terribly written that they could only ever work on skittish 13-year-olds. But as dumb as they were still entertaining enough to engage with back in the day. It was fun to just fuck around and pretend they were real. Core childhood memories. So this morning I was sitting at my desk watching YouTube while sipping coffee. My typical routine before work. Before leaving, I did a quick scan through my emails. Nothing unusual. There was an invite to a wedding, a newsletter from my old university, my boss complaining about some bullshit. But right before I was about to close my laptop, something new landed in my inbox. It was from an address I didn't recognize. Just one word in the subject line. Sorry, a bit weird, a bit concerning. Probably malware. I barely respond to the emails that I actually have to. Why would I bother with this? I ended up clicking on it anyway. Life had been a bit monotonous recently. Maybe this would prove to be something interesting. The message was only a few sentences long. I'll paste it below. One night a woman was hit by a speeding car at night. The driver was intoxicated and did not call the police. Instead, he dragged her bleeding body down into the sewers and left her there to die. They found her body 2 days later and brought it into the morgue, where they cleaned her up and tucked her away. But when they went to take her out 2 weeks later, she was missing, her empty body bag filled with stinking sewage. If you do not forward this to 5 others by midnight, she will be in your room tonight. She will seek vengeance. This is not a joke. You know what you did. I think I laughed out loud after reading it. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd seen one of these. What a blast from the past. Albeit a bit more intense than the ones I remembered seeing as a kid. But I suppose that these things evolve over time. I was still a bit perturbed that it had been sent to my work email. But then again, I work at a pretty big company, and it probably wasn't a terribly hard thing to find. The email contained an attachment as well. A single PNG file named her. I just figured it was going to be some AI-generated image of a demon woman. An attempt at a cheap scare in order to prolong the joke. So I decided to humor the sender by opening it up. But there was nothing there. Just a plain, black image. What a letdown. I didn't think about it much for the rest of the day. Work was stressful, and I had to force myself to endure a boxing class afterwards. By the time I got home, I was ready to eat dinner and just pass out. After eating, I was lying on my couch, sipping sangria while messaging this girl, Elisa, that I'd matched with on Hinge. I was having trouble coming up with things to talk about. So I mentioned the email. She was about the same age as me. So I figured she'd get a kick out of it, which she did. She gave me her own email and asked me to forward it to her. She wanted to see it. Just curious. So I sent it over. Then I put my phone down and went to go take a shower. When I checked my phone again, she'd sent another message. Holy shit, that's terrifying. I messaged her back something like, I know, right? I'm shitting bricks just thinking about it. But she told me she wasn't joking, and that she wasn't talking about the story. Look at the image again, and turn your brightness all the way up. Look closely. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to read before going to bed, but I went ahead and did so. I opened up my email and then re-downloaded the file. Then I turned the lights off and raised the brightness on my phone as high as it could go. I stared intently at the screen. It took some squinting, but I was able to see it. Elisa was right. It was absolutely fucking terrifying. You still couldn't see much, but you could see just enough. A set of floating teeth, just barely reflecting the minimal light there was. The crescent shape suggested a smile. 2 eyes hovered above. Both of them were unnaturally wide, as if they were actively being pried open by unseen hands. Immediately, I turned the lights back on. You know that feeling you get when you dig into your pockets and your wallet or phone isn't there. I was feeling something similar to that. but with an added layer of dread. The details just didn't add up. Was the email a joke or a genuine attempt at a scare? It was too terribly written to be serious. But if it was a joke, then why was this image the creepiest shit I'd ever seen? Elisa sent another message, saying that she'd use Lightroom to lift the exposure, make the image as bright as possible. I stared at her second email, sitting in my inbox before opening it up. And this is the point where any humor or nostalgia was completely sucked away from the situation. The image was still extremely dark, but enough details had been revealed for it to be somewhat clear that it was a woman's face. Well, kind of. More like something imitating a woman. Something extremely uncanny. It felt like my brain was trying to convince me that it was actually a mannequin, mostly due to the paper white skin. But the longer I stared at it, the less likely that seemed to be, because I'd never seen a mannequin with an expression like that. Something so hateful, so evil. It didn't even seem possible for any person or machine to recreate. A smile was there, though the jaw was clenched, the teeth pressed tight together. The nostrils were large, flared wide open, each one like a shotgun barrel. The eyes were owl-like, stretched out in a painful-looking way, but the brows were drawn down, the skin furrowed heavily between them, as if this person were actually supposed to be squinting. A contradiction of features. I don't know how else to explain it. I tried doing a reverse image search, but it came back empty. I know that's not definitive proof of anything, but I've been hoping that at least an obscure art form would have turned up. The picture was just so odd and frightening that being able to connect it to something would have maybe settled my nerves a bit. Whoever had conjured this whole thing up was good, because it had freaked me out in a way that I really didn't like. I was standing in the kitchen, just mulling it all over when somebody knocked at my door. I checked the time, seeing 10 past midnight. Weird, but alright. I checked the peephole, seeing a cop standing at my door. Even fucking weirder. I opened it, and immediately she asked me to step outside. No explanation. Just this dead serious look in her eyes, as if she thought I was hiding a body somewhere. I asked her what this was about. Come. Out. Now, she said, her voice now barely above a whisper. Just do it. Maybe I'd done something while I was blackout drunk? In any case, I obliged. As soon as we were out in the hall, the cop shut the door behind me. She gestured for me to follow her, and I did. The first question she asked me once we'd made it outside to the parking lot was whether I lived by myself or not. I told her by myself. She took a deep breath, introduced herself as Officer Viana, before explaining that she had been called over here to deal with a noise complaint. I knew who she was talking about. A guy named Sam living 3 doors down from me. Rich college kid. Kind of annoying as fuck, but I wasn't the one who called it in, after warning him to shut the music off. She walked outside to leave when she looked over at the window leading into my bedroom. I live on the 1st floor, and my unit's right beside the entrance. If you were about average height, you'd be able to see into it from the lot. She said that I hadn't closed my blinds and that I'd left my window open, and that the street lights were just bright enough for her to be able to see inside. She said that she saw the outline of a figure standing by the door, completely still, as if they were waiting for somebody to enter. She said it didn't look like a doll or mannequin, that she got the sense it was something dangerous. The entire time she spoke, she had a hand on her weapon, her eyes continuously darting between me and the window. I did remember leaving the windows and blinds open. It's a bad habit, but somebody would have had to break through the mesh screen in order to get in. I would have heard it. Sam's music bleeding through the walls would not have been loud enough to muffle it. Not a chance. And then I realized that I'd gone into my bedroom to reach the shower about half an hour before she showed up. I hadn't seen anything then, but what if I just hadn't looked? Honestly, I didn't want to believe what she was telling me, because if it was true, then what in the fuck was I dealing with? We were standing too far away from the building for me to be able to see anything, so I began walking over to get a look at it for myself. But Viana stopped me. You probably don't want to see it, she told me. For your own sake, I wouldn't recommend it. Her tone was earnest enough for me to believe her. I asked her what I was supposed to do then. She told me to just wait. She'd already called for backup, and once they arrived, they'd go ahead and enter my apartment and investigate it. It didn't seem like I had another option, so I told her all right. At this point, I'm still hanging on to skepticism, more as a coping tool than anything else. The backup arrived nearly 20 minutes ago, and they're still in my apartment. It was getting cold outside, so right now I'm waiting in the lobby. If anybody's wondering, no, I still haven't told them about the email. There was just no way it could have been connected. But now I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm not sure what to expect from here. If anything else happens, I'll update. Story 3. My neighbor died weeks ago. So, why do I still hear her walker at night? I don't know how to start this without sounding insane. Maybe I already am. Maybe you'll read this and think I'm just another liar trying to scare strangers online. I get it. I would think that too. But I don't want to scare anyone. I just want to stop. I want it all to stop. It started 3 weeks ago when my upstairs neighbor died. She wasn't someone I knew well. An old woman, quiet, frail, never left her apartment unless it was Sunday. I only ever heard her when she dragged her metal walker across the floor at night. She always moved at 3:17 a.m. every single night. I remember because I used to check the clock, annoyed every time I heard her. Then she stopped. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe she moved. Maybe her family took her to a care home. It was a peaceful kind of silence. But then I found a note under my door. It was written in shaky cursive. The paper smelled like dried roses and mildew. All it said was, "You hear her now, don't you?" I stared at it for a long time. No name, no explanation, just that question. That night, I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. The sound came from upstairs, but it was different now. It wasn't a walker anymore. It was something dragging itself. A scraping sound, wet, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. No footsteps, no wheels, just a drag. I didn't sleep after that. I tried to tell the building manager the next day. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "There's no one living upstairs." I told him that wasn't possible, that I had heard her every night for months. He just shook his head. She passed away 2 weeks before you moved in. No, that wasn't true. I had heard her after I moved in, every night, unless I tried ignoring it. Earplugs, sleeping pills. Nothing helped. At 3:17 a.m., I would always wake up and the dragging would begin. Louder now, closer to my ceiling. I swear some nights I could hear breathing, wet rattling just above my bed. And then came the second note. Why me? It was written in the same shaky hand. But this time, my name was scrawled underneath in ink that looked like it had been smeared by fingers Nora. I didn't tell anyone about the notes. Who would believe me? I started recording at night, trying to catch the sounds. But every time I played it back, it was just silence, or worse, static, like something was blocking the sound. I knocked on the ceiling one night, just to see what would happen. I heard it knock back. 3 slow, heavy knocks. And then something whispered from the vents, "Why me?" It didn't sound angry. It sounded sad, like a cry that had been echoing for years, waiting for anyone to answer. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, frozen, waiting for the whisper to come again. But it didn't. Instead, the lights flickered, the walls groaned, and then my phone vibrated. I don't remember putting my number anywhere. I don't remember setting up notifications for whatever app this was. But there it was, a message on a screen I didn't recognize. "You heard her. That means she's yours now." I stopped sleeping after that. I moved my bed into the living room, but it didn't help. The sound followed me. The dragging was closer. Sometimes I'd find wet streaks on the ceiling above me. Sometimes I'd wake up with dirt under my fingernails, my feet muddy like I'd been walking outside. But the door was locked, always locked. One morning, I woke up and found the mirror in my hallway cracked. In the center of the spiderweb cracks, Someone had written in the steam, "Why me?" Only this time, the handwriting wasn't shaky. It was mine. I didn't remember writing it. I didn't remember even standing there. But the toothbrush was still wet in my hand, and my face looked pale. My eyes, my own eyes, looked like they had aged 10 years overnight. I started to realize something. It wasn't just a ghost. It was something else. Something older, sadder, something that needed someone to remember it. And I did, every night, at 3:17. I remembered. I finally called a priest. He refused to enter the apartment. He just stood at the doorway and said, "She's not asking you a question. She's giving you an answer." An answer to what? I asked. He looked at me, pity in his eyes. To what they asked her when she died. To what she asked God when no one came to help her. To the silence she heard as she lay on the floor with her walker tipped over. He stepped back. "Now it's your turn." Last night, the dragging stopped. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe she moved on. Maybe she found peace. But when I woke up, my hands were wet. My floor was covered in scratches. And my ceiling had new marks. They weren't coming from upstairs anymore. They were coming from below. There was a note waiting for me by the sink this morning. It said, "Why me? Nora," and below that, written in a different hand, one I don't remember ever using because you heard her. Story 4. Yesterday, my fiancée and I went for a hike in a forest. When I returned, I learned I was missing for 10 years. Have you ever spent years of your life with someone just to find out none of it was real? I had met Andrew when I was 22, working as a bartender for a shitty hole-in-the-wall bar. He was an incredibly outgoing individual that effortlessly brightened the day of anyone who was within 15 feet of him. He had made the lonely closing shift of a dead Tuesday enjoyable, and after I got off of work, we met up for coffee and waffles at a nearby diner. The chemistry we had was unlike anything I had ever experienced before, and it wasn't long before we began dating. Andrew became my rock that I could always rely on to keep me grounded when the rest of the world was caught up in a squall of chaos. He embraced my love of B-movie horror, and I accepted his enthusiasm for the outdoors after weeks of convincing on his part. Andrew was the life of the party, and while there were times that I just wanted to stay in and binge slasher movies, he would tease me for being a homebody and drag me out of the house to meet up with one of his never-ending swaths of social circles for bowling, laser tag, house parties, or his absolute favorite, the late-night hike through the forest that stood behind the shitty bar I had worked at when we met. It had been a major milestone for me when I quit the bar 6 months after Andrew and I met. With his support and encouragement, I started my own business in a niche field that I was actually passionate about. While the money isn't best, I love the work I do, and even the worst days are still better than having to mop up bodily waste from someone who had too much to drink. At a 40th anniversary showing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Andrew proposed to me during the Damn It, Janet scene. His collection of friends, who had grown on me fast and became my friends as well, hooted and cheered for us and took us out for celebratory drinks after the show. Since that chance encounter 2 years previously, my life had become my own personal heaven. The work I did now was fulfilling. I had an amazing new group of friends, and I was now engaged with the best man I'd ever met. Hey, I found the perfect place we should go for a nice picnic and hike. Andrew told me as I was grabbing the last load of laundry from the ancient dryer in Andrew's basement. I was hoping that we could just stay in for the day. Andy, since I moved in, it feels like we've been going non-stop. I replied, tired but not annoyed at the suggestion. After his proposal, I moved into Andrew's 2-bedroom house. It was quaint, but there always seemed to be another little project that needed to be tackled with both of our work schedules. There never seemed to be enough time in the day to fix all of the little quirks the house had. "Oh, come on, Christy," he said, wrapping his arms around me and giving the side of my neck a kiss. Wouldn't it be nice to actually enjoy the 3-day weekend we have to actually get out and have some personal time together? I moaned as his soft lips and blonde facial hair brushed against the side of my neck. All right, I guess it would be nice to spend time together, just the two of us. Despite moving in together, we hardly had any time to ourselves. The mass of friends were constantly inviting us over and out to celebrate the engagement and to offer help with planning the wedding. It had left us little time to ourselves, and the chance to be alone in nature would be nice. This place we were going to have a nice little spring with a few nooks and crannies out of sight from the main trails. Andrew informed me as he hurriedly threw supplies into his hiking bag. The mischievous look on his face made my face redden. "Andy, you naughty boy," I said before playfully swatting at his butt. He returned the gesture with a pinch of my own, but before tossing the bag over his shoulder and nearly dragging me to my car. During the 3-hour drive to the national park that we would be hiking through, I had dozed off. As we finally arrived, Andrew woke me with an excited expression. Here we are, miles and miles of trails. A chance to really connect with nature. He beamed with a smile that brought one to my own face. "Where did you even hear about this place?" I asked, shaking the last of sleep from my eyes before sitting forward. "Sam and Frankie were telling us about it the last time we went bowling. Don't you remember?" "Not really, with all the friends we have and ideas tossed around. It is hard to keep track of everything. Lucky for you, I have a steel cage for mind," he responded, lightly tapping his temple with a finger. "More like a rusty bear trap." I teased as I mocked a rusty trap, closing with my hands. We shared a laugh before he parked, and we set out for our hike. Andrew had planned a long trek that would bring us back to the car a little before dark. I was glad I had worn an old outfit, so that I wouldn't have to worry about getting covered in mud. When I asked about who would be doing the driving back home after we hiked all day, and he eased my worry with the promise of stay at the motel, we had passed 20 minutes before we arrived. A place I would have seen had I not fallen asleep. With satisfaction at his call ahead and carefully laid plans, we set off into the forest for our day of just the two of us. "Isn't that the same outfit you wore when we met?" Andrew asked, his eyes feasting up and down on my body. "Yeah, I thought I'd just throw on some old clothes since you want to go on an intense hike," I replied, snapping my fingers to get his attention. We both laughed as we ventured further down the trails. An odd thing I noticed while we hiked was the strange absence of other people while we hiked. "I thought you wanted time together, not with a horde of others," Andrew said as we stopped at the top of a cliff with an old picnic table for people to rest before beginning their descent towards the spring. "Of course I want time without a ton of other people. I just think it is strange that we haven't seen anyone else while we've been here. I mean, it's a holiday weekend. You would think we would pass by some other wilderness enthusiast or gun-ho parents dragging their kids along to get away from technology for once in their life. This is a pretty big place. We probably passed by others but just didn't notice them," Andrew said as he sat his bag down on the table and stretched his arms. I smiled as he took off his shirt and stretched his taut form. I took a few steps toward him and gave him a peck before I spoke again. "Take a picture with me," I said, leaning against him and fishing my phone from my pocket. As he wrapped an arm around me, I lifted the phone up and took a picture of us. As I went to take another, a large buck jumped out from behind a nearby tree, startling us both. In slow motion, I watched as my phone leapt from my hands and down the cliffside to the unwelcoming arms below. With a faint crack from below, I could feel my heart drop to my stomach. Fuck, I dropped my fucking phone. That stupid fucking deer made me drop my phone. God damn it, I could kill that shitty fucking thing. I yelled out in frustration. "Whoa there, I think you might have broken a commandment there," Andrew said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm glad you think this is such a joke, Andrew. I'm not trying to make a joke out of it. I am sure we will be able to recover any photos that are on your phone. Plus it was old anyways. I'm pretty sure you have had the same phone since we met. I know you've been wanting to upgrade for a while, but haven't really had a chance," he said as diplomatically as he could. We made our way down to where we were sure the phone had fallen, and luckily we were able to find it. The phone had dived straight into the soft embrace of rocks and branches, and the shattered screen was more than enough evidence of how useless it would be. Andrew pulled a plastic bag that had once contained trail mix and placed the destroyed phone inside before stashing away in his hiking bag. "First thing tomorrow, we will go and get you a brand new phone. The best one they got, even if it means I gotta sell a kidney to get for you," Andrew said, trying to cheer me up, obviously aware of my disappointment at losing the collection of memories of our life together that had been gathered on my phone. We continued on towards the springs, crossing over an old wooden bridge that created and grown with every step as we crossed over it. The entirety of the short time we spent crossing it, my whole body was on edge at the overwhelming sensation of the bridge threatening to collapse at any moment. With a momentary hazard past, we found our way to a pleasant spring resting beside a cliffside. The gurgle of water leaking out and falling down onto the rocks below created a serene background besides the rustling wind and crunching of leaves and twigs as we approached it. Leaning forward, Andrew cupped his hand and brought a handful of spring water towards his mouth before sipping at it. "Are you sure you should be drinking that?" I asked, thinking about what things could be contained in that water. "You drink spring water that's bottled with millions of microplastics in it. At least this is straight from the source," Andrew said as he splashed his face with the spring water. "You know, there's a little overhang here that we could..." Andrew trailed off as he made a gesture with his hands. "I'm not really feeling up to it. I am still irritated about dropping my phone, and don't think I'm in the right headspace for that," I said, noticing a momentary flash of rage cross Andrew's face before it shifted to an understanding look of disappointment. "Well, you should at least try this water." He gestured to the water as he spoke before glancing absently in the distance. I tried a small sip of the water, and the taste was heavy with a strange metallic taste. Just before I was about to comment, Andrew was already stepping off toward the trail. When we approached another bridge, I insisted that Andrew lead the way as it spanked across a rather steep decline. After he proved the structural integrity of it, I began crossing for myself. Just as I made it halfway through, a horrid crack from the wood echoed through the air. As I fell through the bridge, my hand stretched out to catch myself. The nails of my left hand dug into the wood before being ripped out as my weight jerked my body below. In the briefest of moments, I looked out towards Andrew. A malicious smile greeted me as I tumbled toward the earth below and was embraced by darkness. As I regained consciousness, I was greeted with the sight of the stag's skull wrapping its long tongue around the bleeding fingers of my left hand. I screamed out in terror, only to be greeted with Andrew's worried face gracefully holding my bandaged left hand. "Thank God you're okay," Andrew said, slowly setting my hand down and helping me sit forward. My clothes caked in dirt, and a long tear down the right side of my jeans with scrapes and cuts leading to the missing shoe on my right foot. I tried to reply, but he hushed me to conserve my energy. He told me he was going to climb back up and try to call for help as he didn't have any signal where we were. I tried to beg him to help me back up, but he was already walking away before I could form the words. I raised my undamaged hand to my head and was greeted with a sharp pain on the side of my head and a small wet patch of blood. Panic racing throughout my body, I forced myself to my feet. It felt like hours since Andrew had gone off for help, and it was now well into the night. I stumbled my way through the overgrowth and began my slow ascent up the hillside back towards the trail. Upon finally reaching the trail, surrounded in the darkness of night, I looked around for any trace of Andrew only to be greeted by silence. The sounds of wind or wildlife were missing, and the only audible noise was my labored breathing and rapid heartbeat drumming in my ears. Dragging my way back to the spring, I greedily drank from the water, ignoring the odd aftertaste. Glancing at a small pool of water at my feet, the shadowy reflection I saw was a skeletal form of myself. I turned away as tears filled my eyes. Pain rippled through my body as I shambled through the dark, my head swimming as my vision blurred. "Christy, where are you?" Andrew yelled out in the distance before he rounded a corner, coming into view. Calling out for me in Andrew's voice was an 8-foot monster. Legs bent backwards connected to a skeletal torso draped in baggy flesh that stretched and shifted to attempt to mimic the human form. The swollen and bulbous head had 2 antlers poking out as the mouth of broken teeth cluttered together in the attempt to form a smile as the thing hunched over to greet me. I was stunned into silent horror as the beast with Andrew's voice reached out to me. "You had any so worried." The familiar voice struggled to say through gnarled teeth as charred hands wrapped around my wrists. I yanked my hands back as adrenaline scattered my body away from the demented form. I ran away, heart pounding. Panic and tears blurred my vision almost as much as the leaves and branches that smacked my face as I escaped in a direction that I hoped would lead to freedom. atop the cliffside where I had dropped my phone. I paused long enough to catch my breath. Leaning against the picnic table was an old metal trekking pole with electrical tape wrapped around the worn-out handle. I grabbed the ancient hiking stick and leaned against it before starting back out of forest when Andrew pulled himself over the cliffside. Without thinking, I brought the brass mud tip of the pole down onto Andrew's amorphous face, knocking a chunk of fleshy clay off in the process. Andrew dropped to his knees with flakes of ash rising from his body. The blob of his head formed into a grainy recreation of the face I had stared into for countless hours since we met at the bar all those years ago. "I love you," spoken to me in a voice similar to that of an animal mimicking the words of a person. Smoke rose from the missing chunk in his head before his body fell into a confusing blend of shapes that I couldn't decipher. Tears streaming from my eyes, I turned away from my fiancée and fled from the forest around me. As I shuffled past the edge of the forest, I was greeted with the familiar sight of the bar I had met Andrew at so long ago. A small group of people smoking outside noticed me immediately and rushed over to me as I collapsed. The last of the adrenaline spent as safety from my living nightmare finally embraced me. I had been missing for 10 years. On the magical night I had met Andrew and thought I had begun an amazing life with my soulmate, I had, in reality, closed the bar after an empty night and walked directly into the forest behind the bar in a trance-like state. When my car was found the following morning by the bar owner, she called my phone to see if I was having car troubles the night before. When I didn't answer, she checked the security footage to find me walking off into the forest. Her concern heightened as the grainy video displayed a strange shadow figure at the edge of the trees, seemingly luring me towards it. For 6 months they searched the forest only to find my damaged phone and my lost shoe. The worst was assumed and my missing persons poster had circulated the state. But after all these years, I was assumed dead. Miraculously, I had somehow survived, vastly malnourished at 70 pounds. Patches of hair missing, several poorly healed scars littered my body, the worst of which were the scars around my wrists and ankles that remind me too much of rope burn scars. The implications as terrifying as the monstrous forms Andrew had taken. There had never been an Andrew. I try to tell myself that every day, but I still have all of these amazing memories of someone who truly loved me and all the memories we created together with friends. When I have explained the memories I have of the time since I left the bar all those years ago, I have been told it was my mind trying to protect itself, creating an imaginary world where everything was perfect to shield me from the hell I was actually living. Even as those memories begin to fade, and I accept the reality that there never was an Andrew, I still miss him. I loved Andrew. He was my soulmate. When I wake up drenched in sweat from the night terrors of that final hike, one thought still lingers. What would have happened had I continued the fantasy with Andrew? Would I have ever escaped? Or would I still be lost in the forest? Story 5. My roommate found a new pair of shoes by the dumpster. We should have never put them on. When guests visited our apartment, they always commented on the smell. Something old, almost medicinal. We blamed the building's age, and after removing their shoes to come in, they'd eventually stop noticing it. 3 years later, and I still smell it. Reminds me of hospitals from my childhood. My roommate Paul had the bigger room because he was here first, and I had responded to an ad online to rent the other. Kitchen, common area where we had the TV and our gaming consoles, dining nook, and a covered patio. Paul and I got along even though we came from different worlds. His was one that required a lot of posturing with friends and being perpetually online. Mine was maybe lonelier. Somehow we clicked, and after our respective workdays we often found ourselves collaborating on meals and playing games late. I liked RPGs. He preferred co-op shooters, which I joined reluctantly because he got frustrated, yelled, and gave me side-eye whenever I suggested staying calm. He blamed his thick fingers. From our apartment, you could look down at a parking lot where every Tuesday garbage trucks made their rounds at 7 a.m. to the chagrin of tenants whose bedrooms face that way, like mine. I feel like these are important details. I'm describing my life as it has been for a while. It's where I live, and it's where I am now. It's the mundane little facts that I need to tell you, so that they serve as counterweights to the hefty truth I'm about to unload in search of sober advice. I just need to tell it so that you can understand. You won't understand, but I've got to at least try. Ollie, check it out. I remember Paul said. I slurped some Cheerios messily and looked up from my phone. What up? I said. Those look new. I lazily pulled myself up and looked out the window. Huh? What where? Those shoes. I'm gonna go get them. Paul rushed out and soon emerged in the parking lot. I watched him step gingerly in his moccasins to the dumpster and scoop up a pair of bright white sneakers, grinning up at me as he scurried back. The door slammed. I pressed into my lower back to stretch as Paul came in. He proudly displayed the pair of shoes in one hand and snapped with the other. Tight. They don't stink, I said. The shoes were completely white, and despite sitting by a dumpster, were impeccably clean. Smell like roses, these, he said. Well, will they fit? Size 11 baby, he confirmed. Nice coincidence. Now we've come to the part of the story I can't really expect you to believe. I wouldn't. In my family, we've seen tragedy. My younger brother was born with a disease that meant lots of operations before he could even walk. Hospitals became second homes. Iodine soap, a familiar salve. Plastic-wrapped food and peel-back tin cap juice in those milky plastic containers a family meal. I accompanied my parents every time they went, and each time was like sucking the color out of dreams, the whimsy out of imagination. I didn't grow up all at once, but my childhood was not child-friendly. I learned that life was limited, solutions pragmatic, and usually muted and smelly. Let me try 'em on, said Paul. He sat on the couch, pulled off his moccasins, put on the right shoe, then the left, and disappeared. As soon as he put those shoes on, he was gone. Gone not in any sense that is common. I mean gone without any real-world indication that he was there before. Gone without any vision, nor any sound that would signal his disappearing. He was there, then he wasn't, as if his existence simply ceased. I watched the couch cushion slowly reform itself where Paul had been sitting. I was still standing, but I had moved back up against the wall, and my palms were pressed against it, as if expecting the room to suddenly fall away or for gravity's pull to shift 90 degrees. What felt like eternity was only a minute, and then Paul was back, sitting on the couch, panting, one of the new shoes in his hand. He looked around like a stranger before finding my eyes and locking on, making me feel like prey. Fuck. I yelled. Fuck, he whispered. He slowly regained control of his breathing, and then yelled, wide-eyed at me. Fuck. Ollie. What? I screamed back, shaking. What? Blood rushed back into his face as his complexion softened and his eyes narrowed. Bro, he said, you won't believe it. I didn't believe it. He told me that he was in a forest. He said it was hot and humid, and the noises of insects, birds, and dripping rain were as vivid as anything here. He struggled to recall things at first because of the shock, but as we calmed down, he told me he had truly been there, in the rainforest, standing on moist black dirt and looking up at sunlight-piercing canopy. He said it smelled exquisite. A word that was out of character for him. You're saying you were in the Amazon? I said finally. No idea, bro, he said. Amazon, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Borneo? I don't know. The rainforest, man. The dead-ass rainforest. All right, I said. By now he had taken off the other shoe, and the pair was just sitting there in front of us on the rug. Paul eyed me, looked at the shoes. Yup, he said. You gotta... The hell I do, I countered. You gotta... He grimaced, reading my face, I guess. You wanna... Ollie, you wanna... Trust me. I did. I felt calm enough to know that I did. I had to try this. They'd fit my size 10 feet. I bent down and grabbed one, slipped it on my sock foot, grabbed the other, and held there, staring at Paul. What should I, I prompted. Fuck, right, dude. Listen, just take the shoe off. It's what I did, and pal, I'm back. Just take off the shoes. This was our exchange before I put the other shoe on, and the apartment was immediately gone. No cues, No noise or visual transition. Just there and now here. Where was I? It wasn't forest like Paul. It was a field. I felt the sun on my skin. Hills in the distance, and a highway. A semi-truck rumbling past. Buildings in the distance. I bent down and tore off a shoe, and was suddenly back in the apartment, facing a roommate whose body language bounced with intrigue. "Dude," he yelled, "you just vanished." "My God," I said. "Jesus Christ." He was nodding with his whole head and neck, as if vibing, wide-eyed, unblinking. Sick, right? The rainforest. Not a forest, I said. More like a prairie, I guess. But there was a road, a big truck, buildings too. "No shit. I'd even checked out those buildings," he said a bit curtly. "Yeah, but I came back before I could really get my bearings. It was crazy." "Crazy," he repeated. "Crazy." We both looked at the shoe I held. So, this is the secret. Magical shoes that transported us. Not unheard of in fiction, but I am telling you that this happened to us. Paul went to a forest. I went to a prairie. We found a pair of shoes in the trash and put them on, and were teleported to these destinations instantaneously. It didn't stop there. It couldn't. Would you have stopped? Paul went again. When he came back, he told me he was on a hill overlooking a valley and could see a whole city that he didn't recognize. I went again and found myself on a gray sand beach with cold wind. We went a few more times like this. Once, I found myself on a snowy mountain, and when I reappeared in our apartment, Paul said I was cold to the touch. There was even snow in my hair. Then Paul went again, and the asshole was gone for 5 whole minutes. When he returned, I was surprised to see him cradling about 10 mangoes. "What the hell?" I said. "A mango orchard man. A bleeping orchard fair real. Are they ripe?" We took a break from teleportation over slices of fresh mango. We discussed our experience and decided that the destinations were random. We knew it didn't matter if we walked around, that we always returned to the apartment. We knew there were cities, so we knew there were people. It was clearly Earth, so whatever magic this was, it was here. But when was it? Had either of us seen anything out of whack for 2025? No, we hadn't. Still no people. Maybe we should stop, I remember saying. Give it a rest, maybe. Neither of us wanted to do that. We had the whole day still. We took turns teleporting and we learned more. We started to figure that eventually we should land in cities. A few times we each landed within sight of populations, but since we had agreed to a 1-minute limit after Paul's 5-minute disappearance, we couldn't yet reach those places. Paul begrudged the rule. We also figured that if we hadn't landed in towns or cities yet, it was only because most of the globe is still just wild land, farms, or water. Bad timing. To jinx ourselves like that, I pulled on the second shoe and at once lost my senses. Not that I couldn't feel, because the shock of cold was devastating and I gasped. Not that I couldn't taste, because when I gasped, I lost my breath as my mouth filled with icy salt water. Not that I couldn't see, but it was black night, and then plunging darkness. Not that I couldn't hear, but it was shrieking wind, and then warbled frigid water in ghostly depths that seemed to tear me in different directions. I struggled, panic-filled. Reach, but swim. I thought, must breathe, I knew, but I could escape this. I reached, and just as my lungs began to inhale, my frozen knuckles locked their fingers around a shoe and tugged it off. Suddenly I was in the apartment, on all fours, heaving and vomiting salt water over our rug. Shivering miserably, drenched completely. I felt Paul hitting my back. My ears were ringing, adjusting to the sudden warmth. Paul brought water, patted my back. I said. My voice sounded like gravel. I was in the ocean, I think. Paul just stared, nodded. He was amazed, and still I sensed jealous. Later I sat in my robe wrapped in towels before a humming space heater. I told him about the storm, the night. We had already experienced nighttime in the couple hours we had been at this adventure. I told him about the crashing waves that I couldn't escape. We have to be more careful, I said. That had been enough for one day. We agreed the shoes would stay in the living room, that we would only use them together. We spent the rest of the evening talking about it, unbelieving but convinced. We planned. From now on, we had an entry position. We'd sit in cannonball position, but one leg crossing the other. Both hands would grasp the second shoe as we put it on, so that we'd already be prepared to yank it off in case of trouble. We considered other things like wearing a wetsuit and flippers, goggles, even an oxygen tank, given how likely it should be that we'd land in an ocean somewhere. But ultimately, we decided to buy a large plastic sheet from Home Depot and lay it out on the living room floor to catch water, and to purchase a simple life jacket that wouldn't hinder movement when teleporting plopped us on dry land. I barely slept that night. As frightening as they were, these shoes changed my life. I was jittery with excitement, suppressing fear. We both called in sick next morning. Of course we did. Then we got into Paul's car and went on our errands. Only took an hour. Back at the apartment, we laid our new plastic sheet where the rug had been. Rug was hung to dry out on the patio. The life jacket was a small sea kayaker's jacket, stylish and minimal. We had also bought a small knife, some beef jerky, a headlamp, a length of high-strength static line, and bug spray. The jacket had pockets for these things. We also decided to pack my phone in the jacket. It had a better waterproof rating than Paul's, and my international roaming plan was less ghastly expensive than his. If we ever landed somewhere with signal, we wanted to take photos and videos. But mostly it was to set the timer, as we'd agreed to increase the time to 5 minutes. Later we'd increase it to 10 minutes. We shared a large breakfast of hash browns, egg sausage sandwiches, and dark coffee. Then the adventure began. As the morning progressed, an area of our living room began to look like a naturopath collection. On each trip, we bring something back. A rock, a branch, a flower or bundle of grass, dirt or sometimes trash. It was shocking how rarely we landed close to people, yet how often we found trash. It became clear that we were hitting places all over the world. Wrappers with Chinese lettering, a grocery bag with Tamil, the phone translation app said, French, other languages we'd yet to identify. On one trip, Paul was gone over 5 minutes. I began to worry. His phone rang, and I picked it up. Ollie, it read. I accepted. Paul, I said, haltingly. Brew. I heard him yell. It was a perfectly clear call. Paul, I exclaimed. I stood and paced. Paul, where are you? I'm not sure, but I got bars, bro. So I'm Callan. Any landmark? What's the climate? Pretty dry. I think I'm in a desert, but there are power lines I see. I guess a cell tower's close, so... My hand was in my hair, as if calming my mind. Clear skies, he said. Maybe you're stateside somewhere. Southwest? Take a photo. We can reverse image search back here again. Or wait, just open the map app. I downloaded a ton of regions last night. Hold on. I waited a few seconds. No dice. No internet, just calling. GPS shows I'm nowhere, he said. Damn. Yeah. Hey, Ollie. What's up? Just then he appeared almost exactly where I was pacing, and I bumped into him, knocking us both to the plastic-covered ground. We laughed maniacally. When we calmed, he showed me some photos he'd taken. Joe, guess or eat your heart out, I said. Huh. You know, that Google Maps Street View game? It shows you a street view somewhere on the planet, and you guess where it is by dropping a pin on a map. Whoever's closest wins. I played with colleagues a few times. That's an idea, said Paul. We created a map, named it Jumping Jimmy's. Then we did a reverse image search on one of the pictures that Paul had taken with my phone. While it wasn't conclusive, it gave us some lookalikes. Could be that one. Red sand. In Saudi. I said, but look at that rock. A bit too unique. You would have seen that. This one? Devil's Desert. Not sandy enough. Namibia? No. Wait, that one. Paul exclaimed. What's that? Oh, yeah, that looks good. Says, Atacama, Chile. Yes, that's it, I'm sure of it. Mark it. We chose a series of icons that we labeled by the percentage of how sure we were of each location. 90% on the Atacama Desert, green circle. Elation welled up in my heart. I had always loved to travel, and now I was traveling the world incognito. Paul and I were prepared, ready, and eager. We thought we anticipated everything. If only we kept our guard up. By evening, many colorful icons dotted our map. We had taken dozens of photos. One of Paul's toothy smile beside a grinning shepherd on a mountain road somewhere in Kyrgyzstan. Another of a group of people at a bus stop in a Colombian town. Paul envied how often I landed with people. "Yeah, you always hit the good places," Paul said. "I just get trees and hills. Every single time." Puddles pooled on the plastic tarp. In our living room, from a handful of times, we found ourselves swimming. Paul wanted to visit a city, but I wasn't ready to increase our time limit enough to walk to one, or to board a bus like in Colombia. We had to take it slowly, and I knew that if Paul would be patient, we'd land in one. But then it finally happened. Tokyo is the largest city on Earth, with a population over 30 million. Fitting then that it was the first big city we happened upon, or that I happened upon. I had learned to rein in my expectations when slipping on the second shoe. In less than an instant, I was teleported onto a narrow road, remarkably carless and calm, staring up at skyscrapers glinting in sunlight. I recognized Japanese on the shopfront, and English accompanying all the street signs. In fact, I'd been to Tokyo before, and so the sight was familiar. The sight of me, however, less so, at least to a curious couple ogling me. I realized a foreigner in the middle of a Tokyo street, wearing a life jacket packed with survival items, and awkwardly sat hugging his knees, and grabbing a shoe would look bizarre. I scampered to my feet, and out of the way of a stout little delivery van driving past. I smiled at the couple who continued walking. I retrieved my cell phone. 09 minutes 4 seconds left before I should remove a shoe. Something immediately caught my attention. The sweet scent of tempura frying. I located its source. A small restaurant with ubiquitous Norin fabric hanging to mark its entryway. I was in Tokyo. I loved Japanese food. Loved it absolutely. Here I was. I had to, right? We couldn't control where we landed. So who knows when I'd happen upon Japan and Tokyo itself again? I found my hands searching my chest as I realized I had no money. We should have been traveling with credit cards at least, but they pay with cash here mostly. Impractical to travel with every currency, though, and impractical to expect a currency exchange. Then it dawned on me, to my shame and to my joy, that I could dine and dash without so much as a step to flee. Parted the Norin to enter. Konnichiwa, hello. I sat at the bar in the narrow locale, removing my life jacket ashamedly and hanging on a hook underneath. I ordered the tendon by pointing. The aroma, the delectable crispy vegetables and shrimp, beautifully crisp and umami flavors. As if waking from a dream, I remembered Paul and quickly checked time. I was already 10 minutes overdue, with averted eyes and utter embarrassment and shame for what they'd think. I snatched my life jacket and ducked under the bar. Removed the shoe. "Son of a bitch!" yelled Paul. "Where the fuck were you?" "I was freaking out, man." We said 10 minutes. He sniffed. "What's that smell?" I begged his forgiveness and placed my hands on his shoulders, urging him onto the couch. Calm. "It's toasted sesame," I said. I was in Tokyo. I ate tempura. Tempura? That fried stuff they serve with sushi. "Sure, yeah." "Did you say Tokyo? A city? You ate in a city?" he yelled, smiling. "Damn right," I said. "Jumpin' Jimmy's," he yelled, and I repeated that refrain reflexively. "Mark it down. A city? You lucky bastard. Low-key smells insane. You lucky asshole. And you didn't bring any back." "Damn it," I said. "I'm sorry, Paul. I didn't think about it. When I saw the time." "Yeah, all good. Man, I want to land in the city." Paul's eyes were on the life jacket, but not really. They were distant, imaginative. I couldn't tell if he was more happy or more envious. Long stares are tough to decipher. "You'll get there, man, I promise." "We'll get you there." For a moment, annoyance crossed his expression, but it didn't linger long enough for comment. "Yeah," he said plainly. We jumped a few more times, and then Paul said he wanted to take a break. Envious, it turned out. He was sulking. Disappeared into his room, without too many words between us. I figured he'd just have to let it settle, and we'd be back at it in the evening. I fixed myself a sandwich and ate it while observing our disorderly living room. Souvenirs, laptops, wet plastic. Then I retired to my own room, surprised to feel tired. I think the jumps take it out of you. I sank into willful sleep. When next I woke, it was dark outside. I'd slept the whole afternoon. Clock read 9 p.m. Out in the living room, everything looked the same. Paul's door was shut. My mouth felt dry, and so I poured a glass of water and leaned on the counter, marveling at our mess again. Then I saw the shoes were gone. I set the glass down and skipped to Paul's door, knocked. "Paul, you awake?" I opened it. Paul, not there. As I rushed back into the living room and started appending cushions in search of shoes. It was like watching an actor in a movie you've already seen. I knew he'd taken them. I knew he'd jumped. The life jacket was on the floor. I retrieved my phone from a pouch. Idiot, I thought. You left it. No missed calls, no texts. I called Paul's phone and heard it ringing in his room. Idiot, I said to myself more sharply. How long had he been gone? I looked for any new artifacts, any notes or new pins on our Google map. Nothing. I checked the tarp, which was mostly dry now. His car was still parked outside. I opened our front door and stuck my head out. Hallway was clear. This son of a bitch straight up donned the shoes in peace. I said aloud. In anger, I sounded more like Paul than myself. Oppressive silence seemed to coalesce. It was a bit more humid than normal. All the extra salt water. Suddenly our pile of artifacts and souvenirs seemed nasty. So I grabbed a garbage bag and shoved everything in, tied it off. I was helpless. Hours went by. It was 3 a.m. by the time I felt tired again. My eyes stung. I drank some water and retreated to my bed, where I finally let myself pass out. Beep, beep, beep. Groggy and petrified, I calmed myself when I realized I was just waking up. The garbage truck upturned the dumpster, its metal arms clanging as it guzzled trash, and then replaced the container, drove off. I fell out of bed. 7 a.m. Out in the living room, the scene was unchanged. No Paul. He had been gone for so many hours. I cooked runny oatmeal, added raisins, and slurped it. Could he have drowned? Didn't take the life jacket, the buffoon. Real possibility. Maybe he landed in Vegas and would pop back home to regale me with some story worthy of The Hangover. Wild animal could have attacked him. But I struggled to imagine he wouldn't have the time to remove a shoe. Maybe he's just on a hike. I knew I shouldn't have eaten that tempura. I liked Paul, but I knew he was quick to jealousy. Why didn't I smooth things over? It would have taken 5 minutes max. Paul's ego needed to be coaxed. 2 days and already we're at each other's throats? No, that can't be it. A misunderstanding, maybe. He's just off to prove a point. Don't fuck with the rules. Ollie, he'll tell me. Tell yourself, man. Leaving precautions behind. No phone even. God damn it. I was chewing on a raisin. The wet oatmeal juice resting in my mouth, awaiting to be swallowed. I was staring at the plastic sheet on our living room floor. One moment, that's all I was doing. The next, I was staring at a body, face down, shirtless, holes in his back, blood pooling, some dripping down the torso. White shorts, pockets outturned, stained. One white shoe stained. The other foot bare and dirty. Thick fingers, bent and broken on one hand. The way jumping works. It makes it seem that this body had been there for as long as I've been looking at that spot, that I've been staring at it while I slurped cooling oatmeal, that I should feel guilty for only plunging into nightmare after the body appeared and not before. Paul's body, his hair, his broken hands, the smell. My mind recalled images of hospitals in gowns with geometric prints, hands scrubbing harsh brown bars of soap-foam that smelled medicinal and metallic and burnt. The smell of memory competed with the smell of death, one trying to sanitize the other because it cannot be. It can't. He can't be dead. Oatmeal dribbled down my chin before I could close my mouth. It suddenly tasted like raw meat, and I spat into the sink. I became aware of my pounding heart playing catch-up. All my senses were delayed, as if reality could not so abruptly be changed, so noiselessly debased to this horror. Each sniff triggered a gag. Each blink felt eternal. Give it enough time to just erase this. Blink it out of existence. I know it can be done. Please, please, please. I write this anonymously. My name's not Ollie and his is not Paul, but I need help. There's a body, shot to death, laying on a plastic tarp in my living room. There's only one shoe the other is gone. No one will believe me. What do I do? Story 6. I'm a park ranger at a nature reserve, and I want to tell my stories. In all the world, there are thousands of creatures, most ones you probably know about, but there are some creatures that we do not speak about, things that our many think to be better left forgotten. I want to make sure some of these creatures are not forgotten, for if we do not learn from the past, we are doomed to repeat it. The first story I will tell you is from my early work, when I was inexperienced in this field. This was the first time I was allowed to go out into the field alone. It was meant to be a normal circuit around the park. It's not around the entire park, of course. That would take way too damn long. Just a quick 30 miles. These circuits normally take all day, but they're pretty uneventful. Your main objective is to hit the spots that people use as campsites to make sure no one is on the reserve who shouldn't be. People aren't allowed to camp on the reserve for the most part because of the types of wildlife that lives here. I was about halfway through my circuit, coming up on another site, when I encountered it for the first time. Because I wasn't experienced, I didn't know what to call it at the time, but I asked one of the older guys at the reserve and was told they're called lap springs. Lap springs look similar to a giant horny frog. They normally get 1 foot minus 1.5 inches tall. The main difference between a lap spring and a normal frog, aside from the size, is, as you could imagine, their behavior. Instead of being in the water for the majority of their lives, they act like tree frogs, crawling up to the tops of trees and using their tongues to catch birds that fly by. They get their name from what they do when they get into the water. The lap spring slides into water and consumes a truly massive amount of water, to the point where the animal swells to nearly 3 times its normal size. From what the researchers at the reserve have figured out, it does this as a defense mechanism to make predators think it's bigger than it actually is. And it uses the water as a projectile if the predator isn't warded off by the size of the creature. When I came across a lap spring, it was in the process of consuming water at the river that ran next to the campsite. Seeing a giant toad was not what I'd expected on my first day out by myself. I'd encountered some odd creatures up to this point, going out with more experienced rangers, but we'd never come across one of these things. I sat there on the four-wheeler for a good 2 minutes watching the lap spring suck up water from the river when I heard a noise that sounded like a high-pitched shriek from a bird, but it sounded louder than any bird I'd ever heard before and much higher pitched. Considering the strange creature I had just seen, the lap spring, I decided that whatever made that noise was something I wanted far, far away from. I quickly revved the engine of the four-wheeler and sped off towards the next campsite. The rest of my circuit was pretty uneventful. I saw a few deer resting near a campsite. The four-wheeler scared the off unintentionally. I came across a group of teenagers smoking weed on a campsite closer to the office on the reserve that I had to tell to leave. They, being dumbass teenagers high as fuck, wanted to argue with me that they had permission to be there. But after I told them this area had a large population of predators, including grizzly bears, they decided to leave. I didn't tell them about the much more concerning creatures that hunted the bears. However, when I made it back to the office, I told Gonzalez about what I saw, and he explained what the lap spring was. He wasn't sure what made the shrieking sound, however, because there were a few giant birds that lived in the reserve and a couple other creatures that made similar sounds. He didn't elaborate on what those other things were at the time, but I found out a couple years later. He said, "You should be glad you got out of there as quick as you did. Pretty much everything that makes noises like that is a predator, and even if the noisemaker didn't get you, the lap spring probably would have." I didn't go out on another circuit for another month after that because I had to fly back home for a funeral. My cousin had passed away in a car crash, and my parents insisted I needed to attend the funeral. Even though I'd only met him once and didn't really know the guy. Not saying I didn't care that he died, but I mean who really wanted to take a flight halfway across the country to attend a funeral for someone you didn't know? Anyway, that's off topic, and I think that's about all I had to say today. I've been wanting to tell these stories for a while now, and just discovered this subreddit a couple weeks ago. Y'all got some crazy stories on here, and I thought mine would fit. But for now, I hope y'all have a wonderful morning, day, or night. And this is to be continued. Story 7. I had the strangest phone call of my life. I should have realized what it was sooner. I don't know exactly where to start. I was in my dorm room, and the sun was setting. My roommate, Alex, had gone cave exploring with his friends. He'd asked if I wanted to join, but I wasn't a big fan of humidity and darkness. I was just messing around on my laptop and convincing myself I'd start working on my translation homework soon. I'd run out of things to do when my phone rang. I thanked Alex for giving me another reason to procrastinate. I answered a little too quickly. His voice exploded on the other side, interrupted by shaky breaths and the cracking of footsteps. "Hey, dude." "Hi," I replied. "You okay? You having fun?" "Yeah, it's cool. Hey, listen, can you come pick me up? In like an hour? I thought you guys said you took the bus and then hiked to the entrance. I'm really exhausted, and I got lost, and honestly, I just want to get out. I want to get in your car, and I don't feel like hiking 3 miles back to the bus station." "Well, you should have thought about that before." "Dude, please." I thought about it for a minute. He'd sent me some location earlier. It was a 2-hour drive. "Look, I'm kind of low on gas. You'll have to wait for me to fill up." I responded, hoping he'd get the hint about gas money. "Yeah, whatever. Just come. I'm cold and tired. I've been wandering around aimlessly for a while." "What do you mean? Are you alone? Where are the others?" He took a deep breath before responding. "According to my map, I'm close to the other exit. The others? I don't know. Dana said she was turning around a while ago, and I haven't heard from her since, and Luis and Astor were right behind me for some time. But then I turned around and realized that Luis was gone, and we called for him, but he didn't answer, and Astor started acting strange, like she knew something I didn't. She became hysterical and refused to go with me this way. And now I don't know where the fuck she is. I'm honestly mad at them, and I think they're just pranking me. Please just pick me up." Something in his tone made me feel sorry for him. Maybe they were pranking him. His friend group had a weird habit of messing with each other. "Okay, I'll come get you." "Thanks. So how is it?" I figured I could stay on the phone with him for a while, so he wouldn't feel scared. Hey, Eli. You there?" Yeah, just, wow. This cave, you wouldn't believe it. The entrance itself is huge. Yeah, it's something else. The first passage is a little downward slope. Walls are wet like glistening stone and smooth but kind of weirdly soft in patches. I brushed my hand over one spot just to see, and it gave a tiny bit. Not mud or anything, just elastic, kind of warm. Warm? Yeah, I don't know. Probably just the humidity or something. Makes me wonder what kind of mineral deposits are in here. The floor is soft too, in some places. Totally normal in a cave with this much moisture, right? You step and it depresses slightly like packed dirt. Weirdly satisfying. I kept joking that it feels like a mattress. A mattress? Don't laugh, okay? It's just squishy in spots. You step, it sinks, then pops back. Very odd, but hey, makes walking fun. Keeps you on your toes. Alright, just be careful. I know. So we hit the first chamber. Huge. Ceiling vanishes into darkness. The walls glint, minerals catching the flashlight, shiny patches, streaks of red and brown. Looks like wet clay, but not exactly. Almost organic looking, but probably just light trickery. I mean, caves do weird stuff with reflection, right? Yeah, sure. There are these shadows, too. Weird angles, long, thin things dangling from the ceiling. I keep telling myself they're just roots or stalactites, but sometimes they seem to stretch a little when I blink, like they're following me. Totally my imagination, I'm sure. Sounds unsettling. Nah, not really. More curious than anything. I even stepped on a soft patch that squelched a little mud, I think, or maybe water seeping under the rocks. Weird noises echoing. Probably just the cave acoustics. The air is thick humid. Metallic smell in spots. Probably just minerals. Either way, it's intense. Makes you really feel the cave. Anyway, the deeper I go, the passages twist and bend. I thought I'd be out by now. I turn thinking I'm going back to the first chamber, and nope. Different place entirely. Angles change. Walls shift a little when I'm not looking. Totally normal for caves, right? I mean, natural erosion and all that. Yeah, sure. There's more. Shadows, veins in the floor, weird reflective puddles. Air pockets of warmth and cold in patches. Makes it exciting. Really makes you focus on every step. I'm loving it. Eli, you would love this. Alex, you're sounding more nervous than you admit. Nervous? Nah. Curious. Always curious. That's all. I mean, it's a cave. Of course, it's creepy in spots. But really, I feel fine. I'm fine. The line crackled. I could hear faint gurgles echoing through the passages behind him, though he didn't comment. I hung up, and I started my car. I'd been driving to the location of the cave for about 1 hour when he called me again. Dude, this thing is fucking changing around me. I think there's a stream of water below somewhere. I keep hearing this splashing below. I'm almost there. Don't worry. I'm almost there. Okay, another shaky breath. Okay, I parked my car inside at the side of the hill. I needed to climb to get to the location pin. He couldn't have picked a more accessible entrance. It had to be somewhere you couldn't reach by car. After around 20 minutes of fighting with bushes and rocks, I finally got to the top. I stood on this clearing, puffing from a hike. The fog hung low, curling around the tree trunks. The hill stretched gently before me, dotted with dips and rises, shadows and light patches. I called Alex. Hey, I'm, here. Don't panic. Just, I can't find the entrance. I can't stay still. I keep moving, and everywhere I step, it reacts. The walls curve toward me. The floor lifts slightly. The air pulses wet. Alex, step back just slowly. I can't step back. I think it's following me. Or maybe it's holding me. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, all moving in time with each other, almost breathing together. I touched another wall, veins, ridges, folds. Warm, slick, alive. I think I'm inside it. Inside what? I was beginning to lose my cool. The air around me was warm against my cold sweat. The sun was now fully down, and my eyes kept darting to the tree line, dark crowns of branches all around the clearing. The sky was enormous and hostile. I couldn't find the entrance in the dark. I only had the moonlight and some faint stars guiding me. If I wasn't going to find Alex, it's not a cave, Eli. It's the body. Stop saying that. Just fucking calm down and go back the way you came. A huge, grotesque organism. You'll be fine, just stay fucking calm. Everything I thought was rock is flesh. Veins, ridges, folds, wet surfaces that pulse and breathe. I can feel it sensing me, reacting to me. Every movement I make, it flexes beneath my hands and feet. Alex, oh God, I can hear it. A heartbeat, slow, wet, immense. It reverberates through the floor, through the walls, through the air. I'm inside something alive. A living, breathing monster. Alex, you need to move back toward the entrance. I think I'm inside its chest or head, its body. I can feel, it's aware. And the sound of it breathing around me, wet, deep, alive. Oh God, Alex. The line fizzed with wet static. A low, gurgling pulse echoed faintly. I started panicking. Alex was almost hysterical, yet his words were stressed, almost spit out. He kept rambling about Guts and his friends. Oh my God, I think I found it. Holy shit, the exit? I heard a bunch of obscenities, then a pause. When Alex finally spoke, I had stopped paying attention to him. I think I found its heart. I didn't answer. In my continuous studying of my surroundings, I'd realized the tree line was now lower than when I'd gotten up there. I looked down, then back to the tree line, which was moving up and down almost imperceptibly. Then it lowered and lowered and lowered. Story 8. My cat is afraid of me. It wasn't always this way. When I adopted Gerald as a kitten, he acclimated to my little one-bedroom duplex right away. Not a trace of timidity. He's about 1 year old now, a sleek orange tabby with white paws who gets into more trouble than I can manage. I've caught him climbing curtains, knocking over glasses of water, and sending embarrassing keyboard smash messages to my co-workers by napping on my open laptop. Normal, well-adjusted cat behavior. This week, he started to avoid me. I first noticed it at meal times. When I filled his dish on Monday morning, I was met with an empty kitchen. Gerald is usually a demanding little fellow, yowling and circling my legs all the way to the kitchen. I figured maybe he was still napping somewhere else in the house. When I checked later that evening, the bowl was empty, but once again, he did not come running when I refilled the dish. So this became our routine. I just scooped his portion, gave the bowl a shake to rattle the pellets around, and made myself scarce. It wasn't until I left the room that he would creep out of hiding and begin eating. I was glad to know he wasn't starving, at least, but I can't say I wasn't a little hurt. Next, I noticed how he acted around me. Before things changed, he would make himself at home on my lap every time I sat down to do some computer work or watch TV, rubbing his cheek against my face. It was almost irritating how affectionate that cat was. I miss it now, starting that fateful Monday. Whenever I'd enter a room, Gerald acted like some foreign threat had just entered the house. First spiked, back arched, he would creep away at an angle so as to keep me in his sight. Once, I tried to coax him out of his sudden terror with a handful of treats. As soon as I got within a foot of him, a low growl rose in his throat. He bolted into the next room, where I found him perched at the top of his cat tree, just out of my reach. He stayed up there for the rest of the night. I only heard him bumping around the house again once I'd gone to bed. I work as a university professor, so I'm usually gone for most of the day. If I know I'll be staying late to finish some grading or hold office hours, I'll often call up my sister, who I'll refer to as Laura, to ask if she or one of my nephews can drive over to check on Gerald. He's still an adolescent and full of energy. I worry about him getting bored and stir-crazy when he's alone for too long. On Tuesday, I had back-to-back meetings after class, followed by a mountain of essays to grade. It was going to be a long day, so I called up Laura in the morning. She agreed without hesitation. "Don't stay too late tonight," she added. "You need to rest more, Cam." She was probably right. I hadn't been sleeping well recently. I had been suffering from vivid nightmares and sleep paralysis. At some point almost every night, a horrible compressing sensation would start in my chest and crawl up my throat. I'd wake up gasping for air. At the time, I chalked it up to a recent breakup and the stress of preparing my students for exam season. I was about to hang up when I remembered how strange Gerald had been acting. By the way, Gerald's been kind of skittish recently. I added as I locked up the house and got into my car. Don't be offended if he doesn't come out right away. Anyway, spare keys in the usual place. Let yourself in. I thanked her again and headed to work. Later that evening, just as I was leaving my last meeting, I noticed a new voicemail. It was from Laura. She sounded chipper as always, but I could tell she was choosing her words very carefully. I know my sister. Something was off. "Hey, Cammy. Just calling to say that the kitty's doing fine. The boys and I stopped by after school to play with him. He's such a joy. I wanted to ask something. Did you happen to stop by the house before your meetings today? We saw someone leaving out the back door as we were pulling up, but your car wasn't in the driveway. It's probably nothing, but I thought I'd ask. Have a good night." I felt a pang of anxiety in my chest. I hadn't been home since the morning. It could have been a delivery driver, but I wasn't expecting any packages. Maybe she'd seen my neighbor leaving their side of the duplex and mistaken it for mine. Laura hadn't mentioned anything being amiss inside, so it couldn't have been a burglar. I tried to convince myself of this, but the tension didn't leave my shoulders as I finished out the day and drove home. When I pulled into my driveway, All the lights were on inside. The kids probably forgot to turn them off when they left. I thought. I was still on edge. I crept up to the door slowly, listening for activity on the other side. I didn't hear anything at all. The quiet did nothing to comfort me. Usually Gerald would hear the rumble of my car and rush to the door or window to greet me on my way in. I was reaching for my keys when I heard it, a rattling. Good. I thought at first, Gerald is eating something, but it was too purposeful to be a cat pushing pellets around. It was gentle, precise, a light shake followed by silence. Then it would repeat. Someone was rattling my cat's food dish. As quietly as I could manage, I put my keys down and crept over to the kitchen window. The curtains obscured most of my view, but through the sliver in between I could see a person standing there on the tiles, mostly turned away. As I suspected, they were hunched forward, holding out the metal cat dish and gently shaking it to as to coax the cat out of hiding. Gerald was huddled in the corner of the kitchen, frozen in place. The stranger was barefoot, with long, matted hair that hung down their back in tangled clumps. Then I noticed what they were wearing. They had on nondescript gray sweatpants, the kind I only wear when I have nowhere else to be. At first glance, their shirt was just a plain purple tee, but reading the bold white text on the back, my stomach dropped. It was my last name. That was my game shirt from last year's staff kickball tournament. The stranger in my kitchen was wearing my clothes. I sank down beneath the windowsill and dialed 911. I ran back to my car, locking myself inside as I waited for the operator to pick up. 911, what's your emergency? The woman on the line answered. There's someone in my house. I whispered, my throat closing up. Looking back, I should have thought to drive away at that point. But the truth is, I was more terrified for Gerald than myself. My cat was stuck in there with whoever was inside, and I had no idea what their intentions were. Ma'am, can you speak up? I managed to get my breathing under control. There's a stranger in my house, I said, keeping my voice low. Someone broke in. I stayed on the line for a few more minutes to give my address. As the responder took down my information, I felt a sickening sense of guilt. Gerald was still in there. I couldn't leave without him. Against all better judgment, I left my vehicle. I took a rusty shovel from the yard and approached the door, climbing the steps as silently as I could. I needed the element of surprise. Steeling myself, I kicked the door and, brandishing the shovel in front of me, the intruder did not flinch. They stood up straight, swaying unsteadily, and turned towards me. I couldn't help but think that they moved like a baby deer, legs wobbling, each step as slow and measured as if it was their first. As they twisted their head in my direction, I finally caught sight of their face. I saw me. I don't know how else to say it. The stranger wore my face. The same nose, same dark brows and thin lips. Even the small port wine stain on her, or my left cheek. The woman's eyes were wider and shinier than mine, though, holding a blank, inscrutable expression I have only seen on prey animals or very young infants. For a split moment, I think I felt something like pity for this wretched creature. She looked so lost, and yet so viscerally, evolutionarily wrong. She opened her mouth as she saw me. She made a noise, something between a cry and a shout, a half-formed word meant for me. As she wailed, black bile dribbled down her chin. Then, all at once, she lurched towards me, hand outstretched, and grabbed my face. I felt searing pain as her long, unkempt nails dug into the skin of my cheek, puncturing it and dragging. I don't know what came over me then, perhaps some long-dormant survival instinct or panic response. All I can remember thinking is that this thing was not human, and that it needed to get as far away from me as possible. I slammed the shovel into her chest with a sickening crack, yelling nonsense the way one yells at a bear to spook it from a campsite. Black bile splattered against my face and neck and the kitchen floor. As I shoved her back, she wrestled with me, howling, trying to tear the shovel away. As she struggled, I could see an animalistic sort of fear well up within her glassy eyes. Then, as soon as she'd entered my life, the woman who wore my face turned and scampered from my home like a spurned animal, leaving the door swinging wide. I stumbled outside just in time to watch her clamber over the chain link fence, disappearing into the dark. After I was sure she had gone, I went inside to check on Gerald. He appeared unharmed, washing his paw casually as if nothing had happened at all. That is, until I got too close. He still doesn't trust me. I can tell, with great difficulty. I managed to get him into his cat carrier. Then I slapped a bandage over my bleeding cheek, threw a toothbrush and some clothes into a bag, grabbed Gerald's carrier, and left for my sister's place across town. Despite the short notice, Laura set up their fold-out couch for me as soon as I explained my night from hell. I even told her about the face. Though she didn't say a thing to discredit my story, I can tell that she thinks my interpretation of events is altered by stress and lack of sleep. I appreciate her listening anyway. She helped to examine and dressed a wound on my left cheek, a gash just above my birthmark. It was deep, still oozing and hurt like hell. My assailant would have taken a whole half of my face if I hadn't warded her off in time. I'm sure of it. As for the stranger, I know she's out there somewhere. When the cops finally showed up at my home, though they didn't find a thing, no trace of foreign DNA in my home, no tracks or damage left behind. This whole situation makes me feel crazy. I haven't been back since. I know I'll have to return eventually to collect my things. Until then, I've called in sick from work for the next few days to get my head on straight. I'm posting my story to this forum as a vent, I guess, a way to get out of my system. No one else believes me, but why would they? I can't think of a single rational explanation for what I saw that day. And as for Gerald, I've tried to make peace with him again. I stocked up on his favorite wet food, switched out his toys, and even bought some fresh catnip. The other day, he came close enough to sniff my hand. I'll call that a win. Otherwise, he's the same lovable ball of energy as always. He loves playing with Laura's kids, and even the family dog. Still, the fact remains, my cat is afraid of me. Story 9. The full story of my paranoia. This is a bit of a long story, but that's the thing about going crazy. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow boil until the pot rattles itself off the stove. I'm putting every detail here, because the details are what made people roll their eyes. The details are what made me doubt myself. And the details are what eventually pushed me to start acting like a stalker, just to prove I had one. I live alone in a one-bedroom on the 6th floor of a narrow, brick and glass building that pretends it's boutique by way of a chalkboard in the lobby that says "Welcome Home" in cursive. My view is the back alley, a sliver of sky, a row of dumpsters, and the backs of cafes where staff stand in the doorways blowing steam off their hands in winter. In summer, there's a smell of hot metal and overripe fruit from the produce store. The alley hums differently every season. I know that now. What the humming should sound like when no one else is there. I keep odd hours because I do copy editing and manuscript formatting for a small press that thinks deadlines mean last minute or not all. So I send a lot of emails at 2 a.m. and nap in chopped up blocks. Nights aren't scary when you live at your own pace. Nights make sense. Nights are consistent. In June, nights stopped being consistent. It was small at first, my front door latch. If I let the door swing shut, it doesn't click unless I turn the knob and push it into the frame. For the first 2 years, I learned the muscle memory. Then, suddenly, I'd come home from the elevator and the door would be even with the jam, silent. You think you forgot. You make a note. I started a list in the notes app called "Am I Losing It?" It was half a joke. I wrote 1. June 12th, door shut quiet. 2. 3. June 13th, coffee mug moved. I leave it slightly skewed on the drying mat. It was parallel to the edge. 4. 5. June 15th. Faint cigarette smell in hallway at 11 p.m. No one on my floor smokes. I know because the property manager wasted an entire tenants meeting threatening to fine people. 6. 7. June 17th. Coin on the bookshelf slid. I keep a 20 on the corner of a shelf like a paperweight. It helps me remember where I set down the envelope with rent receipts. Don't ask me why the coin matters. It mattered to me. Hey, I told myself I was making content out of nothing. I told myself my brain likes patterns and anxiety will feed it. Kara, best friend, told me the same thing over wine. You work alone. Your sense of time is fuzzy. It's an off week. Leave your apartment messy on purpose. See if anything actually changes. So I started leaving tells. A hair taped across my bathroom drawer. A thread balanced on my bookshelf coin. A Q-tip wedged between my sliding balcony door and the rail. Not paranoid, just curious, like a kid setting flour on the floor and waiting for Santa's boot prints. On June 21st, the hair across the drawer was cut cleanly in the middle, both ends still trapped under the tape. A pair of cuticle scissors were laying by my soap dispenser. I stared at it for a long time. The scissors were mine. I hadn't used them. I called Kara. She said I'd probably snagged it myself and didn't remember. She said, "Hey, we used to tape hair across our door mini fridge, and it always fell off because of humidity." She said, "You're scaring yourself." I bought a doorbell camera. My camera lasted one night before a stern-looking security guard knocked and asked me to remove it. Dark hair, dark eyes, early 30s, knuckles like he'd worked with his hands before sitting in a lobby. He introduced himself as Aiden and said the rule wasn't his. He just had to enforce it. "If you want to point something inside, go for it," he added, lowering his voice like he was doing me a favor. "Just not into the hall." The management company sent a mass email within 24 hours of that night, reminding tenants that cameras were not allowed on the hallway side of unit doors. For privacy reasons, they claimed. So I did what Aiden said and set the camera inside, angled at the door. That was the night the camera battery died at 3:12 a.m., despite showing 86% at midnight. I woke to the colorless smear of dawn and a low battery chime. No footage. The door was shut quietly. I started sleeping with the TV on, not because I thought the sound would deter anyone, but because the static blue wash on the wall would wake me if a shadow moved. The truth is I started sleeping like prey, shallow, with a rope of dread twisted under my ribs. You can't live that way and be a person during the day. During the day, you forget your own passwords and leave a burner on. During the day, you pour milk into the sink and realize you were aiming for your coffee. On June 26th, I found a folded paper napkin under my doormat when I came in from a run. It was the cheap brown kind from the cafe downstairs. Inside, someone had printed, in narrow, careful block letters, "You forgot the green onions again." It was true. I'd spent the last few days reminding myself that I needed to stop at the grocery store and pick some up. My brain told me to not make this about me. It's a joke. Someone teasing their roommate. Not for me. But it also reminded me that it was my doormat the note had been left under. I took a picture and added it to my list before taking a shower. I made a quick run after lunch to pick up some groceries and tried to put it again out of my mind. The next morning there was a note inside my apartment. A yellow sticky note on my kitchen counter I swear I hadn't put there. Same handwriting. Block letters that try to look friendly by putting hearts in the middle of the O's, which did the opposite. Onion green is not green onion. I called the non-emergency line. The operator's voice was soft with fatigue. "Has there been a break-in?" I told her the latch thing. The hair, the napkin, the sticky note. "Ma'am, we can send a patrol to check the building, but unless there's damage or an intruder, there's not much we can do. Have you notified your property manager?" "Yes." And he said, "Make sure you're locking the door." A patrol came, took one look around, and told me to get a better lock. The locks are drilled into a steel frame set by the building. The super isn't authorized to change the hardware. The company has a master key. It's a security issue if every tenant has their own, the super explained, eyes sliding off mine. His name is Gerard, but everyone calls him Jerry. He's the kind of man who calls women kiddo past 50 and thinks it's charming, but he seemed harmless to me. The sticky notes multiplied. They were never threatening, not in a way that would trigger anyone else's alarm but mine. They were corrections. They were comments. They were edits. Your splats of olive oil on the stove are greasy. Run the heat a little lower. A few more minutes and your coffee won't be sour. Your shoes will last longer if you don't kick them off by the heel. And once you look good in red, go back for the sweater. I had tried on a sweater at a consignment shop on Dundas and put it back because I'm not actually a red person. I started scanning faces everywhere. In line at the cafe, on the streetcar, in the reflection of the subway window. The security guard from the camera day, Aiden, smiled when I came in and asked if everything was okay. He had the practiced gentleness of people who get yelled at professionally. I said, I thought someone might have a copy of my key. You'd be surprised how often that happens, he said. Contractors, old supers, roommates, you can get your own deadbolt installed high up. They usually allow that. He glanced up, measuring my height. You might need a stool to reach it though. I'm 5'2" on a good day. I laughed too quickly. I'm not paranoid. I told him. It's probably nothing. Probably, he said. But paranoia is just a safety feature. Like a seatbelt. It's dumb right up until it's not. Every story has a moment where you could pull the fuse out before the fire gets to it. Here's mine. I started following people. Not like a pro. Not like the movies. I'd see a man whose hair was the same, almost black as Aiden's, but with a different jawline. And I'd keep going after my coffee, and then, without making a choice, I'd turn when he turned. If his bag had a frayed strap, I'd fixate on it and decide the fray was a clue. If he held the door for a woman and looked after her a beat too long, I'd decide that beat was intent. If he got off at my stop and stayed for 3 blocks in front of me, I'd slow down so he could pass me. Then I'd fall in. I took pictures of shoes, backpacks, the backs of heads. I put them in a folder called Crowns because from behind, people are mostly scalped and the idea made it less creepy. On July 3rd, I saw my handwriting on a sticky note in the corner of my bathroom mirror. It looked like a mirror's version of me, familiar and wrong. It said, anyone would think you're crying in here. The handwriting wasn't mine. It was pretending to be. The O's had those tiny hearts, like a tell. It's grotesque what your brain does with detail like that. For the rest of the night, every O I typed looked like an open mouth. Kara came over and did a full sweep like we were in procedural drama. She checked the air vents. She looked for pinholes in the walls. You're giving someone a show they want, she said finally, trying to sound gentle and landing somewhere resentful. If there's anyone at all, you've lost weight, sophomore. I'm eating, I said. I wasn't. I was gnawing. There's a difference. You're sleeping? Yes, I lied. She looked at my couch. The pillow had a sweat shadow in the shape of a skull. Let me stay. I don't want you to think I'm crazy, I blurted, and then laughed, and then cried in the bathroom with the faucet running so Kara wouldn't hear the shape of it. The next night we set the trap like we were 12. A glass of water balanced precariously atop the door, hair across the drawer, tape on the deadbolt, salt sprinkled on the kitchen floor, to dust for footprints like detectives who couldn't be bothered to buy powder. We huddled in my room with the lights off, whispering until whispering turned into jerky laughter. At 2:44 a.m., the front door clicked. A careful click, not the crash of our paranoia rewarded, just a careful click, like 30 other nights. The water didn't fall. The deadbolt tape was intact. The salt looked smooth. At 2:48 a.m., the bathroom fan turned on by itself. It's motion sensing. Sometimes it's finicky. Kara whispered, maybe your pipes are haunted. We lay there and watched the ceiling. Every distant door slam in the building. Every elevator shudder. Every dawn bird that mistook the city's light for sun and started early. Kara fell asleep snoring lightly at 3:10. I lay awake until 5 before exhaustion took me to sleep. The sticky note the next morning said, love the sleepover. Brings me back. I took it to the building office. Jerry said, kids have too much access to prank supplies. We never had this problem with real tape. I want the locks changed. We can do that when there's a turnover. I want them changed now. We don't authorize one-off changes, he said. And anyway, if someone's being a creep, changing the lock won't stop notes under the door. It was on my counter. He shrugged. He looked 47 and wore in unpressable pants. Maybe your friend thought it was funny. The thing about losing your mind is that the world starts treating you like you already did. That's the practical harm. The existential harm is that you start treating yourself the same way. You start leaving yourself little bribes. If I'm good for a whole hour, I can look through the peephole. If I finish this chapter, I can check the deadbolt tape. You bargain with your fear like it's a toddler. On July 8th, I followed a man into the grocery store on College because his shoes looked familiar. Dark sneakers, white soles, a notch in the leather near the right big toe. I pretended to examine green onions. He stood close enough to reach past me for cilantro. I could smell his gum, mint sharp, almost medicinal. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the price. That's not a thing I ever noticed before this. How hard some men look at prices. He took a cilantro and went. I watched the shape of his shoulders under his jacket and thought of photographs where something terrible has already happened, but all anyone can see is light. He turned right on Beatrice. I turned right on Beatrice. He cut across to the next block, and I followed from the other side of the street. Then he stopped at a laundromat and bent to tie his shoe. He wasn't looking at me. I could have walked past. Instead, I stopped too, 10 paces back, and pretended to check my phone. He looked up. We made eye contact that felt like a knife in the air between us. He frowned. He said, politely but confused, "Can I help you?" And I said, sorry, and fled. I went home and triple-checked the balcony Q-tip. It was missing. The door was still latched from the inside. That same day, a maintenance notice went up in the lobby. Annual fire alarm inspection, July 12th to July 14th. Entry to units between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. with notice. I circled the date on my paper calendar. I told myself this was normal, necessary. I told myself this was good. People with clipboards who aren't allowed to be creepy. I told myself 100 things. It was like trying to nail fog to the wall. On July 12th, a man with a plastic visitor's badge and a can of air stepped into my apartment for 15 to 20 minutes tops to test the ceiling sensors. He had forearms like he lifted actual ladders, not the lightweight aluminum ones the company uses. He kept his baseball cap on low. He said he needed to check the smoke detector in the bedroom too. When I said I'd follow him, he shrugged like, sure, whatever. He took the smoke detector off its base with a twist and checked something I couldn't see. Then he put it back with a harder twist like a lid. He smelled like spearmint gum and faint cigarette smoke. When he left, I took the detector down myself. I stood on the stool Aiden had teased me about needing and reached up with both hands and tried to curry the plastic loose with my fingernail. I took the whole round plate off. There was nothing but the white belly of a standard unit and a printed date of manufacture. I felt stupid and paranoid. I wanted to cry. I put it back and it didn't quite click. I had to wiggle it until it sat flush again. For the rest of the afternoon, it blinked red every 40 seconds like a little heart too slow to save anyone. That night, the sticky note said, "You're right. Red isn't you. I don't have space here for every small way I came apart." It wasn't dramatic. It was a fine thread unspooling over 2 weeks while the world went on being its crisp self. Buses huffed and sighed. Pigeons bickered. A kid on my floor wore a dinosaur jacket with felt spikes and refused to go anywhere unless he could press his own elevator button. I kept working. I kept showering. Sometimes I could feel the exact place an unfamiliar I would stand if it could watch me. In the doorway, slightly to the right, where you can see the mirror without being in it. I kept grocery shopping badly, as demonstrated by the notes. I kept checking my tape on the deadbolt and finding it torn, and I kept telling myself it must be my own hands. I kept sleeping with the TV on, but woke anyway, bone stiff from shivering in fights I mostly lost. On July 16th, I snapped. I mean that in the most boring sense. Something inside me just didn't stretch anymore. I told my boss I needed a week. I packed a bag without my toothbrush because I had an irrational thought about someone touching the bristles. I booked a $102 room in a budget hotel near the Gardner because I figured if you're going to be watched where there are security cameras every 10 feet and men in suits practicing their neutral faces for meetings. I told no one where I was going. Not Kara, not my parents. Not the please text when you get home. Group chat comprised of 3 people who all live in different time zones and therefore know how to say love you without punctuation. I felt guilty about that. Then I felt guilty about feeling guilty. Then I drank 2 tiny hotel vodkas and fell asleep in sheets that smelled like industrial citrus. At 2:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown. If you're going to hide, you should book a place with better curtains. I lay there with the phone lighting the bottom half of my face and actually argued with myself about whether to turn on the bedside lamp. Turning it on would make me a silhouette. Not turning it on made me a target for whatever was already in the dark. People always say that in stories. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true in your body. The dark is a physical thing sitting on your chest. I texted back before I could stop myself. Who is this? The 3 thoughts came up immediately. Then, unknown. You don't lock your balcony door. Not well. I was on the 12th floor. The balcony was a pane of glass facing the highway and the cold. I stood up in the bed and felt my knees go wrong. I pulled on my coat and my shoes while texting 911 with shaky thumbs. I was on the phone with a calm woman who kept me repeating the hotel name when someone knocked, quick and polite. The fire alarm on the ceiling tinked once, like a spoon against a glass. Ma'am? Security. A man's voice through the door. Different from Aiden's timbre, but same flat politeness. Everything okay? Ma'am. A pause. Longer. Softer. Sophia? I opened the door. Despite everything screaming at me to not open the door, I opened the door because he knew my name and said it like we were in a conversation already. The man in the hall wore the hotel jacket and a lanyard and had that same nothing face men wear when they expect to be bumped by a rolling suitcase. He took in the room behind me and then looked past me to the sliding glass balcony door and said, "You want to close that?" The balcony door was open a hand's width. The winter air made a little ribbon of itself on the carpet. He stepped in like he owned the space, and for a second, relief won. He shut the door hard enough to make the glass bounce in its track. He pulled the drapes shut. "Someone's been on the balcony above," he said. There was snow kicked down. It hits the alarm sensors sometimes. He shrugged. "Kids. Sorry you were disturbed. Someone texted me. Could be a prank." He looked at my phone. My fingers clenched around it like a handle. "We can move you to another room." He led me down the hall to a new door and opened it with a clean beep of his master key. He glanced at the bed, the window, the neat hotel painting. He stood there like he was waiting for something. And then he said, "Take care of yourself, Sophia." He left. I sat on the edge of the new bed, shivering away that felt like each muscle was getting its own small bad news. I looked back at the text. "Unknown, you're sweet when you panic. There's a point past which you can't be soothed anymore by rational explanations. It took me too long to get there. When I did, I packed my bag again, checked out, and rode in a rideshare with a driver who wanted to tell me about his cousin's restaurant across town, while I tried not to cry. I went back to my apartment at 4 a.m. because I wanted everything familiar, even the lousy parts. I wanted the alley's hum. I wanted the elevator's judder. I wanted to know my fear by its first name. The deadbolt tape was torn. The sticky note on my counter said, "Hotel soap makes you itch. New lip balm, though." Yes, I walked into my bathroom and looked at my face. There was a red ring around my mouth where I'd been licking, nervous, then smoothing balm over the sore spots. I sat on the closed toilet and shook like I had the flu. When I could stand again, I pulled the smoke detector down. I held it in my lap like a baby while I pried at the seam with a butter knife. The plastic creaked. On the 3rd try, it gave. The back plate came away in my hand. There was a micro SD card taped inside the dome with surgical tape. It wasn't a camera, but its presence was a gunshot in a winter field. It made all the birds rise at once. I set the detector down and stepped backward like it could explode. Then I laughed. I laughed like a lunatic because I understood the trick. If I took the card out and went to anyone, Jerry, Kara, the police, what would I be showing them? A card I found in my own apartment, in a place I could have put it if there was anything recorded on it. The only thing it would prove is that my bedroom existed. I sat on the floor and texted Kara, "Please come over. It's bad." I didn't hit send. I stared at the 3 words, "Please come over," and thought about how many times in my life I'd needed someone and made it sound like nothing. I deleted the text. I mean, he had my number, yet, I don't know, whatever he had. At dawn, I went downstairs to the lobby. Aiden was behind the desk. He looked up with his gentleness, and then really looked. He came around the desk with his palms up like you do for a frightened animal. "Hey, you okay?" I put the smoke detector in his hands. He took it with care. He looked at the card, and then he looked at me the way people do when they're trying to put their face far away from their eyes. "Who else has the master keys?" I asked. "Me, Jerry, the property manager, cleaning contractors for move-outs, the fire inspection team for the week. I'll go check the camera logs." "There aren't cameras on my hall," I said. "Remember? Privacy." It came out mean. I didn't mean it for him. "In the lobby," he said. "Stairwells. Elevator." He went behind the desk and scrolled. He took down timestamps like he was trying to keep them from evaporating. He said, "If you've been feeling weird at night, there's a guy who keeps letting himself in from the alley exit. That door is supposed to lock. I'll have Jerry fix it." Ooh. Hoodie, ball cap, looks down. After midnight, mostly. He glanced at me. It could be nothing. Food deliveries. Food deliveries don't go up in the elevator without calling. Some do. He hesitated. "Can I ask you a question?" "What?" "Have you dated anyone in the building?" "What?" "No. Anyone who dash," he faltered, "had reason to make you want to feel watched." I thought about the embarrassing crowns folder on my phone. I thought about the man at the laundromat. The way he looked at me like I was the problem. Because I had been. I thought about my brain clutching a shoe notch like a relic. "No," I said, "I don't stalk people." It sounded weak to my own ears. "I didn't say that," Aiden said. "What do I do?" "Move out," he said, too quickly, like he regretted it immediately. Then, because that wasn't helpful, "We'll check the stairwells and the roof. I'll walk you to your unit. Change your routines. Don't go home at the same time. Don't leave the balcony door unlatched." "I don't." He didn't argue. That night, I slept under the opera of my own pulse. At 1:12 a.m., the elevator thrummed through the wall. At 1:14, the motion-sensing bathroom fan clicked on, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, counting the red blink of the smoke detector like the metronome of a slow heart. At 1:17, my phone buzzed. "Unknown, you broke my eye. I forgave you. That's love." I turned on every light. I stood in the kitchen, breathing with my palms flat on the counter until my fingers ached. I didn't text back. I didn't call the police. I put my phone into the refrigerator to shut it up, not a permanent solution, but enough so I could hear anything else besides it. I took the butter knife and slid it into my sleeve. I opened my front door without letting the latch click, and then I shut it loudly, hard enough to make a show of it. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain. I went to the bedroom and shut that door quietly like I was tucking in a child. Then I got into the closet. I know, why not leave? Because I wanted to see his face. Because I wanted to know if the horror had a shape. I sat in the closet behind winter jackets that smelled like last year's snow and waited. At 1:39, the elevator hummed. At 1:42, my front door made a sound that was almost nothing, the tiniest accommodation of wood to metal. At 1:43, someone breathed. I thought about describing it better. About how a stranger's breath in your home is a sound like a stray animal in a church, but breath is breath. It's proof that something else is living in the place where you are living. It was close enough to hear. It was near the bedroom doorway. It came with the smell of spearmint gum and cold air. The tiny red light at the corner of my closet ceiling, the one I had stopped being able to see because it blinked so slowly, went dark, then bright. The smoke detector cycling. There was a snap of fingernails flicking the plastic. A weight settled on the edge of my bed. The crease of the mattress, the tiny sound of fabric protesting. A rustle near the duvet. A hand, I think, feeling the warm shape I had left there with pillows under the covers like a bad movie. A sound that might have been a chuckle and might have been a breath caught on a stitch of cloth. I waited until my legs shook uncontrollably. I waited until he got up. I waited until the weight of the bed released and the air in the room changed. He moved around like someone in a home he had learned by touch, a soft bump beneath a coffee table, the little finger taps on the doorframe as he passed. He paused in the hallway. The spearmint smell came closer. He put his face toward the closet, I think. The coats wavered around me and fell back like a sea. He scraped his thumb slowly across the closet door seam. Then he moved away. The deadbolt slid with a sound like metal softly kissing itself. The door closed with that careful hush I knew so well. The chain was left dangling, a touch less straight than before. I didn't move for 10 minutes. The closet turned into a world. When I opened the door, the apartment looked like a set after scene. Bed unruffled, kitchen red digital clock telling a lie about time. The sticky note on the counter said, "You're getting braver." That was the first time the police took me seriously. Not because of the note, because of the audio. The old phone I'd shoved between two cookbooks on the shelf had picked up the deadbolt, the chain, the footfalls, the faint scritch of thumb on wood, the whisper that sounded like, "Good girl," or maybe "Don't curl," like a sports coach telling someone to keep their form. Tell me which is worse. An officer named Blevins came, looked at the micro SD card and shrugged, but when he heard the audio and saw the torn deadbolt tape and the chain slack, he stopped shrugging. "He knows the building," he said. "He's comfortable in here. He wants you to know he's comfortable. He wants you to feel proud when he approves of you. That's a thing." They dusted for prints. They found mine, Kara's, and someone else's partials on the bathroom door and the inside of the front door near the chain. They sent me to sleep at Kara's place while they secured the scene, which turned out to mean took pictures, added tape of their own, and told the property manager about liability. When I came back the next afternoon with two officers, the sticky note was gone. "That's a taunt," Blevins said, looking at the clean counter like it was an insult. He wanted to show he could be in here when he wanted. He wanted to show us that evidence is optional when you have a key. They asked for footage. The building had lobby video that showed Jerry propping the alley door open at 12:50 a.m. and bringing in 2 flats of can paint. It showed Aiden arriving at 10:58 p.m. It showed the fire inspection company bringing ladders and cases during the day. It showed a man in a dark hoodie riding the elevator at 1:39 a.m. with his head down. He didn't look up at the camera. He tapped the key fob and the light blinked. "Who is that?" Blevins asked. Jerry looked uncomfortable. Could be a contractor. At 1:39 in the morning? Sometimes we do off-hours work. Who has that fob? Jerry scrolled and scrolled. The list of fob assignments was a spreadsheet on a dusty office computer. "Master," he said. "Master, master, master." He widened the columns. Looks like one of the master fobs wasn't checked back in after the last fire inspection day. Aiden said very quietly, "It wasn't me." "We're not saying that," Blevins said. Aiden folded his arms across his chest and stared to the glass like the alley could give him an answer if he just focused hard enough. "Do you recognize the shoes?" I asked before my brain could stop me from asking the dumbest question in the room. Jerry said, "Shoes are shoes." Aiden looked at me and then looked at the screen. He drags his right foot a little. "You hear it." He rewound. The sound was faint, but it was there. The smallest, irregular scrape on every other step. That's not a contractor. Contractors wear steel toes and walk like they have a schedule. Who walks like that? Blevins asked. "Guys who don't want to be noticed," Aiden said. He hesitated. "Kids who used to shoplift. Guys who've done time." "You sure do have opinions," Jerry said, fake light. "Want to do my job too, buddy?" "I'm doing it," Aiden said. That night, I went to Kara's anyway. The apartment felt like a mouth with a tongue in it that wasn't mine. Kara made pasta and slid me a bowl, and we watched garbage on TV. We laughed at a thing that wasn't funny. We locked her door with both deadbolts and put a chair under the handle like we were 70 and living somewhere our bones were the only locks that mattered. I slept. I dreamed about shoes scuffing dust the color of ash. At 3:07 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown. Isn't it cozy to have a friend? You breathe quieter when you share. Kara's bedroom door was closed. I listened. I heard her. Even in sleep, the little whistle she's had since we were 19. I typed back before I could talk myself out of it. What do you want? He answered. Unknown. To be let in. I didn't sleep again. We ate pancakes at dawn at a place where the tables are always sticky and the syrup bottle caps are welded with sugar. I took a nap at noon. When I woke up, there was a voicemail from Blevins. They had a name. The man with the hoodie and the master fob was one of the fire inspection contractors. Not the one who'd come into my unit. That guy had a signed form with my signature and a time stamp that matched my memory. Another guy, a man named Colin with a record for trespassing and a sealed juvenile file that used to be an open joke in his family. You know how teenagers are? They found him 2 days later because he went back to the building at 1:14 a.m. like Terror had a calendar. Aiden saw him on the camera and didn't wait. He went up the stairs to the 6th floor instead of taking the elevator because you can hear a person coming on stairs. He met Colin at the top landing and didn't do something heroic. He just said, "Hey man," in a voice that made my throat close when I heard on the audio later. He talked like talking with a rope he could throw. "What?" Colin asked, like he'd been woken from a nap. "Walk with me," Aiden said. "Let's get some air." They walked down together because Aiden knows the building's bone-familiar sounds. The difference between elevator hum and the click a decade-old fire door makes when it hasn't been oiled enough. The rackety laughter from the unit with the 3 guys who live like season 2 of a TV show where nobody learns lessons. The hiss of the boiler. The thin, sharp cry of a new baby in 2B. They walked through the lobby under the chalkboard that said "Welcome Home" in cursive. They walked out into the alley where the dumpsters were graffiti like tattoos. Then they turned left instead of right, which is important, because left is where the alley widens into a crook of shadow behind a cafe, and the security camera above the door has a blind spot there. Aiden said, "Give me the fob." Colin said, "You're not a cop." Aiden said, "No, I'm a witness." There's a kind of silence in police audio that isn't really silence. It has a shape. It makes its own weather. Then there was the sound of a scuffle, a squeal of rubber on grit, a curse. Then Aiden huffed, "Don't." And someone else said soft, "Okay," like he didn't mean it. When Blevins walked me through it later, he kept his voice flat, like telling me a recipe. I think he was being kind. Aiden is okay. He has a line of purple on his forearm and a new dent in his watch. Colin had a flashlight in his pocket that wasn't just a flashlight. It had a camera lens embedded where the bulb should be. The police found a small hard case in the trunk of his car with 8 microSD cards neatly labeled with dates and unit numbers, and a folded paper napkin that smelled like coffee and alley. Some of the footage was mine. He'd breathed in my hallway. He'd sat on my bed and watched the red light blink and blink and blink. He'd filmed himself writing notes on my counter with my pen, his hand careful and neat, and each like a mouth open halfway in surprise. He had other footage too. The old woman on 3A who takes naps in the afternoon with the TV volume high. The couple on 7D who fight, and then have quiet, exhausted sex, a rhythm like rowing. The kid in 5C who leaves his coins lined up on his desk and cries when they fall. He had captured the everyday exhale of the building. He had captured me in the shower with a mirror fog, but not fog enough, and I watched 10 seconds of that before I leaned forward and threw up in a police station trash can, which is as undignified as it sounds. They arrested him. There will be charges. There will be a trial, I'm told. There will be words like pattern prior, intent, and escalation. There will be a paper that says order protection and no contact, and a date. There will be a morning I wake up and a door will click again, and I will not know if the sound is my memory or a new breath. That's not drama. That's statistics. A man like that does not start and stop in neat lines because a pair of handcuffs drew a box around him. He slows, maybe he redirects. He learns to look up at cameras. People have been very kind since it made the rounds in the building. They bring me muffins. They say, "I never would have guessed you look normal." And I say, "Everybody looks normal under fluorescent lights." Kara cried and apologized like she'd been the one who taught him how to tape a card inside a detector. Aiden bought me a red sweater and left it at the desk with a sticky note that said, "You can pull it off." I laughed so hard I startled a man waiting for a courier. I laughed because the O's on his note were round and empty, just O's, and because the sweater is a color I would never choose. The building replaced every lock. They moved me to a unit on the other side of the floor. So my windows look over the street, not the alley. I keep my curtains open at night and watch the lights slide across the ceiling as cars pass. It feels like the city is washing over me on a loop. It feels like breathing alongside something big. Here's a part of the story I don't know what to do with. Even after the arrest, even after the evidence, there's a part of me that thinks about the men I followed for blocks and the way their shoulders set when they felt me behind them. There's a part of me that remembers how that felt, the heat of being the eye instead of the animal, and is ashamed. There's a part of me that can't stop wondering what attention looks like to someone like him, when the thing you want most is the door opening softly. You can live in the world again. Blevins told me when he dropped me off. People don't have to be the shape of your fear. I'm trying. I put plants on my window ledge and bite the dead leaves off of my fingers and feel proud. I cook ridiculous, messy things and leave oil splats on the stove and don't wipe them off right away. I let my shoes get scuffed. I bought green onions and ate them raw over eggs. I close the door and let it click however it wants. Sometimes I wake up at 1:43 a.m. and go stand in the hallway and listen to the building breathe. Sometimes the bathroom fan clicks on by itself and I laugh. Sometimes I put a sticky note on my own counter that says something kind. You did enough today. You are not an animal in a church. And sometimes my phone buzzes at a time when it shouldn't, and I throw it into the refrigerator out of habit. Old tricks for new days. I always take it out. I always check. There are no more texts, just notifications from my banking account or an email from a website I keep meaning to unsubscribe from. There is a crumpled napkin inside my front door, though wedged so it fell when I opened it yesterday, after work. The napkin is blank. It smells like coffee and alley air. Not impossible. There's a cafe downstairs, but specific. I stared at it for a long time with my coat still on and keys in my hand. Then I folded it in half and in half again and in half again until it was a compact, damp square that will not come unfolded without force. I slid it under the toonie on the shelf. I didn't take a picture. I didn't add it to a list. I just let it be the size it is. Because here's the very last thing I learned. A person can be both wrong and right at the same time for a very long time. I was wrong to make the city smaller by carving it into threats with my eyes. I was right to listen to the parts of the night that were not my own. If you're reading this because you think you might be crazy, I don't know what you should do. I'm not an expert. I'm not a movie. I can only tell you what I did. I paid attention until the day the attention pointed to something other than me. I made a record. I told the truth even when it made me look bad. I learned the sound my door makes when it is closed carefully from the inside by someone who is not me. It is a small sound, but it is everything. Story 10. I work fire lookout shifts in Arizona. Something out there is wearing my face. I work fire lookout shifts in northern Arizona. Pine country, high elevation. Isolation is part of the job. Most nights, it's just the crackle of the radio, the hiss of wind through the pines, and the occasional coyote. I've been here long enough to recognize every sound this forest makes. Or at least, I thought I had. 2 weeks ago, I saw something on the ridge west of my tower. At first, I thought it was a hiker. Tall, lanky, moving slow through the trees. I grabbed the binoculars, logged it, called it in. That's standard procedure. Except it was close to midnight, and that ridge doesn't have trails. No one should have been there. I kept watching. The figure stopped between two pines, perfectly still. It tilted its head like it was listening. When I tried the radio again, the signal cut into static. A second later, I heard my own voice echo back over frequency. Everything's fine, just logging it. Those were the exact words I'd spoken a minute earlier. That's when it screamed. Not an animal scream. Not even close. It sounded like something trying to force words through a throat that had forgotten how to use them. Half human, half animal, all wrong. The sound clawed at me in a way I still feel when I try to sleep. By the time I steady my hands and look back through the binoculars, it was gone. The next morning, I asked the rangers to sweep the ridge. They didn't find hikers, didn't find campers. The only thing out of place was an elk carcass, ribs splayed like fingers, hide hanging in strips. The kill didn't look clean, not torn by wolves, not eaten by scavengers. The cuts were messy, almost deliberate. That night, I kept the spotlight sweeping the tree line. For hours, nothing. Just the sway of the pines and the quiet weight of the dark. Around 2 a.m., I caught something crouched just outside the edge of the light. Not an animal, not a man, something in between. Its skin was stretched too tight, like it was wearing something that didn't belong to it. The face, if I could even call it that, looked borrowed. Lips crooked, jaw unhinged too far, like it wasn't built to stay attached. It mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I felt them, deep in my teeth, in my bones. Moments later, it bolted, moving faster than anything should be able to. 2 nights later, when the ground crew went missing, we found his truck abandoned on a service road. Headlights still burning, engine still running. The driver's side door was wide open. The snow around the vehicle was covered in footprints. Bare feet, too long, too many. We found him 3 miles deeper in the forest. He was strung up in a ponderosa pine, like someone had tossed him there. Throat gone, tongue left whole. The snow at the base of the tree had been disturbed. Smears of blood and dirt traced into words. IT wears you. After that, I stopped sleeping. Every night, I heard it closer. Sometimes it circled the tower, breathing under the floorboards. Sometimes it whispered my name in voices that belonged to people I knew. My brother, my old supervisor, even my own. One night, I broke. I whispered back, "What do you want?" It answered in my voice, "Let me in." I filed a report, asked for reassignment. Base denied it, said the evidence was inconclusive. So I stayed, kept watch, waited. The following week, venison disappeared from cold storage. Not cut, not bitten, torn apart by hand. Fingernails embedded in the fat. Tracks led from the locker straight to the tower stairs. Halfway up, pressed into the wood, was a face. Not carved, not drawn, pressed, like something with no skin of its own had leaned hard enough to leave an impression behind. It looked like me. That was 4 nights ago. Since then, the tower has gone quiet. Too quiet. No radio chatter. No animal sounds. Just me in the trees and something circling when the sun goes down. Last night, I woke to the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Slow, heavy, pausing between each step, like it was waiting for me to move first. I gripped the rifle and kept the spotlight trained on the door. Soon after, I heard knocking, not on the tower door, on the glass right behind my head. I froze, didn't breathe. The knock came again, louder. I turned. There was a face press a glass. My face. Only the eyes weren't mine. This morning, base called. Said they'd gotten reports of me transmitting all night long. Calm, steady. It's fine. They said I told them. Just logging it. Thing is, I never touched the mic. The radio's been dead for days. I should have left. Packed up, climbed down, and never looked back. But the forest feels wrong now, like it's waiting for me to try. And tonight, it's worse. The air's heavy. Still, the tree line looks closer than it did yesterday. About an hour ago, I heard movement below the tower. Not circling this time. Climbing. Nails on wood. I stayed at the top of the stairs with the rifle leveled. Something paused halfway up, breathing like it had lungs too big for its body. Slowly, the breathing shifted until it matched mine. Inhale for inhale, exhale for exhale. I backed away, waited. After a moment, the sound stopped. When I checked the stairs, nothing was there. But on the landing, scratched into the wood was something sharp, were 3 words. "You are tired." Now it's past midnight. The spotlight just flickered. My reflection in the glass isn't lining up anymore. It's smiling when I'm not,